When Elena Vale collapsed on a Chicago sidewalk at midnight, 4 months pregnant, starving, abandoned, she never imagined the man who destroyed her life would be the one to save it. Lucien Moreau, the ruthless crime lord she divorced 3 months ago, found her unconscious in the rain, and when he discovered she was carrying his child, something deadly awakened inside him. Because Lucien could lose money, territory, even blood, but he would burn the entire city to ash before losing his family. If you want to see how far this story reaches, hit like and comment your city below. Now let's begin. Rain came down like shattered glass across the neon-soaked streets of Chicago's South Loop, each drop exploding against cracked pavement with the percussion of 1,000 tiny fists. Elena Vale stumbled forward, one trembling hand pressed against the brick wall of a shuttered pawn shop, the other wrapped protectively around the slight swell of her stomach beneath a threadbare coat that had stopped keeping out the cold 2 weeks ago. 4 months pregnant, homeless, starving. The trifecta of hell she never imagined possible when she signed those divorce papers 93 days ago. Her vision blurred at the edges, dark spots blooming like ink stains across her field of view. When was the last time she ate? Yesterday? The day before? Time had become liquid, meaningless, just another thing that slipped through her fingers along with her dignity, her savings, and every foolish hope she'd carried into her marriage. The bus stop bench appeared through the rain like salvation wrapped in peeling green paint. Elena collapsed onto it, her legs finally surrendering to the exhaustion that had been clawing at her bones for weeks. The metal was ice cold through her jeans, but she didn't care anymore. She just needed to sit, just for a minute, just until the world stopped spinning. Her phone, cracked screen, nearly dead battery, showed 11:47 p.m. and 0 missed calls. Not that she expected any. 3 months ago, she had been Elena Moreau, wife of one of Chicago's most feared men, living in a glass penthouse that kissed the clouds. Now she was just Elena Vale again, the frightened girl from nowhere who'd made the catastrophic mistake of falling in love with a monster. The rain intensified, turning the street into a river of reflected neon, red, blue, gold, all bleeding together like wounds that wouldn't close. Elena pulled her coat tighter, even though it did nothing, even though she was already soaked to the bone. She thought about the baby. Always the baby. The tiny life growing inside her that deserved so much better than this. Better than a mother who couldn't afford prenatal vitamins. Better than sleeping in shelters when she could find a bed, or hidden in 24-hour diners when she couldn't. Better than the bone-deep terror that came with not knowing where the next meal would come from. Elena closed her eyes, listening to the rain hammer the plexiglass shelter above her head. She'd tried calling the lawyers 6 times in the past 2 months. The settlement from the divorce was supposed to cover everything: an apartment, medical care, enough money to start over. But every call went to voicemail. Every voicemail went unanswered. And when she finally showed up at the law firm's office, the receptionist looked at her like she was something infectious and said, Mr. Chen was no longer handling her case. No explanation, no forwarding information. Just a door closing in her face while security watched to make sure she left. That was 3 weeks ago. The dizziness got worse. Elena leaned forward, pressing her forehead against her knees, trying to breathe through the nausea. Her stomach was empty, had been empty, for almost 2 days now. But her body still tried to revolt, cramping and twisting like it wanted to turn itself inside out. Just a minute, she whispered to herself. Just rest for a minute. But even as she said it, she felt herself slipping. The darkness crept in from the edges, soft and almost gentle, like falling into deep water. Part of her wanted to fight it, the part that remembered she was supposed to stay conscious, supposed to stay alert, supposed to keep moving because stopping meant dying. But the larger part, the exhausted, broken part, just wanted to let go. So she did. Elena's last conscious thought was wondering if anyone would find her before morning. She never heard the SUVs. 3 black Escalades screamed around the corner doing 60 in a 25 zone, tires hydroplaning through standing water before slamming to a halt at angles that blocked the entire intersection. Car doors flew open before the vehicles even stopped moving. Armed men poured onto the sidewalk. 8, 10, maybe 12, all wearing dark suits that cost more than most people's cars, all moving with the fluid precision of trained killers. They fanned out in a practice pattern, securing the perimeter, while two men approached the bus stop where Elena's unconscious body had slumped sideways across the bench. "Found her," one of them said into his radio, voice tight with something that might have been relief or might have been fear. "Northeast corner, Wabash and 14th. She's not moving." The radio crackled back. "Condition?" "Unknown. She's—" The man stopped mid-sentence as a fourth SUV, this one a black Maybach, that looked like it cost more than a house, slid to a stop behind the others. The back door opened, and Lucien Moreau stepped out into the rain. At 32, he carried himself like a man who'd inherited an empire written in blood and expanded it through strategic brutality. 6'2", lean muscle, wrapped in a Tom Ford suit that somehow stayed immaculate despite the downpour, dark hair pushed back from a face that belonged on old Roman coins. All hard angles and aristocratic bones and eyes so cold they could freeze vodka. But right now, those eyes held something Elena had never seen in 3 years of marriage. Fear. Raw, undiluted, absolutely human fear. Lucien crossed the distance to the bus stop in 4 long strides, shoving past his own security like they didn't exist. When he saw Elena, soaked, unconscious, her face pale as death beneath the flickering streetlight, something cracked in his expression. "Elena." He dropped to his knees beside the bench, expensive suit hitting filthy water without hesitation. His hands that had killed men, that had signed death warrants, that had built an empire on violence, shook as they reached for her face. "Elena, can you hear me?" No response. Her skin was cold. Too cold. And when he pressed 2 fingers against her throat, searching for a pulse, it took him 3 tries to find it. Weak, thready, barely there. "Get the medic," Lucien snapped, his voice cutting through the rain like a blade. "Now!" One of the guards sprinted back to the vehicles while Lucien carefully lifted Elena into his arms. She weighed nothing, literally nothing. He could feel every bone through the soaked fabric of her coat, could see the way her cheekbones jutted sharp against skin that should have been soft. What the hell happened to her? 3 months ago, when he'd served her the divorce papers, she'd been healthy. Not happy. Their marriage had been a war zone for 6 months by that point, but healthy, strong. The fierce, stubborn woman who'd once thrown a glass of wine in his face during an argument about his business and then kissed him so hard they'd broken a table. This wasn't that woman. This was a ghost. A medic appeared beside him. Marco, one of the best combat trauma specialists money could buy, already pulling equipment from a tactical medical bag. "Lay her down flat," Marco ordered, spreading a waterproof emergency blanket across the bench. "What happened?" "I don't know." Lucien placed Elena on the blanket with a gentleness that contradicted every rumor ever spoken about him. "I just found her like this." Marco worked fast, checking vitals, pupils, pressing a stethoscope against her chest while rain drummed against his shoulders. His expression darkened with each passing second. Severely dehydrated, malnourished, possible hypothermia. He looked up at Lucien. "How long has she been out here?" "I don't know." "Days? Hours?" I said, "I don't know." The words came out sharper than intended, edged with something that sounded like barely contained panic. Marco didn't flinch. He'd worked for Lucien long enough to recognize when the boss was 2 seconds from losing his legendary control. Instead, he pulled out an IV kit, prepping Elena's arm with practiced efficiency. "We need to get her somewhere warm, now. I can stabilize her, but if she's been exposed to these conditions for extended periods—" "The penthouse," Lucien interrupted. "Full medical suite. Have everything ready in 20 minutes. Boss." One of the guards approached cautiously. "The car is—" "I'm riding with her." Lucien gathered Elena back into his arms, ignoring the IV line Marco was trying to secure. "You drive. Marco stays with us. Everyone else follows." Nobody argued. They moved as a unit back to the vehicles, Lucien cradling Elena against his chest like she might shatter if he held her wrong. He slid into the Maybach's back seat, never letting go, while Marco climbed in beside him and the convoy pulled away from the curb. The drive uptown should have taken 30 minutes. They made it in 12. Lucien didn't speak during the ride, didn't take his eyes off Elena's face as Marco worked to get fluids into her system. The IV drip caught the passing streetlights. each drop falling with the regularity of a ticking clock counting down to something neither of them wanted to name. Her lips were cracked and pale, her breathing too shallow. And underneath the grime and rain, Lucienne could see the sharp edges of malnutrition carving her face into something almost unrecognizable. "Where were you?" he whispered, knowing she couldn't hear him, saying it anyway. "Where the hell have you been?" The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of one of Chicago's most exclusive buildings, accessible only by private elevator with biometric security that cost more than most people's annual salary. The doors opened directly into a marble foyer where a full medical team was already waiting. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the country's top internists, who Lucienne kept on permanent retainer, plus 2 nurses and enough equipment to run a small emergency room. "Exam room 2, Dr. Chen directed, her voice calm but urgent. "Let's get her on the monitors." Lucienne carried Elena through the penthouse's main living space. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering sprawl of Chicago, furniture that cost more per piece than most cars, art on the walls worth millions. And into the medical suite he'd had installed 2 years ago after a business deal went sideways and left 3 men bleeding in his foyer. The exam room was all sterile white and gleaming steel, more hospital than home. Lucienne laid Elena on the bed as gently as he'd ever handled anything in his life, then stepped back to let the medical team work. Dr. Chen moved with the kind of focused efficiency that came from years of emergency medicine, before Lucienne had lured her away with an obscene salary and the promise of never having to deal with insurance companies again. She checked Elena's vitals, examined her pupils, ran her hands over Elena's arms and legs while dictating observations to one of the nurses. Severe dehydration, acute malnutrition, signs of exposure. Dr. Chen paused, her hands moving to Elena's abdomen. Her expression shifted. "When did you say you found her?" 40 minutes ago. Why?" Instead of answering, Dr. Chen pulled an ultrasound machine closer to the bed. "I need to check something." Lucienne's entire body went rigid. "Check what?" Dr. Chen ignored him, already lifting Elena's soaked shirt to reveal the small swell of her stomach. She squeezed gel onto the ultrasound wand, pressed it against Elena's skin, and turned the monitor so she could see the screen. The room went absolutely silent, except for the beep of the heart monitor. Then, cutting through the quiet like a knife through silk, came another sound. A heartbeat. Fast and strong, and unmistakably not Elena's. Dr. Chen's face did something complicated. Surprise, concern, and carefully controlled professionalism, all fighting for dominance. She adjusted the wand, studying the screen with the kind of intensity that made Lucien's blood run cold. "Mr. Moreau," she said carefully, "were you aware that Elena is approximately 17 weeks pregnant?" The world stopped. Everything. The rain against the windows, the monitors beeping, his own heartbeat, just stopped. Lucienne stared at the ultrasound screen, at the grainy black and white image showing a tiny form curled inside Elena's body, too stunned to process what he was seeing. Pregnant. Elena was pregnant. The math hit him like a bullet to the chest. 17 weeks, 4 months, which meant, "It's mine," he heard himself say, voice coming from somewhere far away. "The baby. It's mine." Dr. Chen's expression remained carefully neutral. Based on the timeline, that would be consistent. Lucienne couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room tilted sideways, and he had to grip the edge of the exam table to stay upright. Elena was pregnant with his child. Had been pregnant when he divorced her, had been pregnant when she disappeared, had been pregnant while she was out there starving in the rain. "How is she?" The words came out rough, barely controlled. "The baby. How is... Heartbeat is strong," Dr. Chen said, still moving the ultrasound wand, checking angles. "Fetal development appears normal despite the mother's condition. But Mr. Moreau, we need to focus on stabilizing Elena first. The malnutrition is severe. If she's been without adequate food and water for an extended period, fix it." Lucien's voice cut through the clinical explanation like a blade. "Whatever she needs, whatever it costs. I don't care. Just fix it." Dr. Chen nodded once, already turning back to Elena. "Get her on IV nutrition. I want a full metabolic panel, complete blood count, and let's get an OB consult up here within the hour. And somebody get these wet clothes off her before she goes into hypothermic shock." The nurses moved immediately, working with practiced efficiency while Lucienne stood frozen beside the bed, still staring at the ultrasound screen where his child's heartbeat pulsed with stubborn persistence. A child. His child. Growing inside the woman he'd divorced to protect. The irony was so vicious it would have been funny if it didn't feel like being skinned alive. One of the nurses gently guided Lucien toward the door. "Sir, we need space to work." He didn't want to leave. Every instinct screamed at him to stay, to keep Elena in his sight, to make sure nothing else happened to her. But he also knew he'd just get in the way, so he let himself be ushered out into the hallway where his head of security was waiting. Vincent Torres had been with Lucien for 8 years, had killed for him, had buried bodies in concrete and lied to federal agents and done a dozen other things that would earn them both life sentences. He was loyal, ruthless, and one of the few people Lucien actually trusted. Right now, he looked worried. "Boss, we've got a problem." Lucien turned to him with eyes so cold they could have frozen fire. "Unless someone is actively dying, I don't want to hear it. It's about Elena." Vincent hesitated. "About where she's been." Everything inside Lucien went dangerously still. "Talk." "I had the team pull surveillance footage, check hospitals, shelters, anywhere she might have gone. Boss, she's been living on the streets for at least 3 weeks. Before that, we found records of her staying in various homeless shelters across the city. The hallway temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. The settlement," Lucien said slowly, "the divorce settlement. She should have had access to—" "That's the problem." Vincent pulled out a tablet, showing financial records that made Lucien's vision go red. The accounts were emptied 6 weeks ago. All of it. $2 million? Gone. Gone where? Offshore accounts. Routed through 3 different shell companies before disappearing completely. Vincent's jaw tightened. Professional work, someone who knew the system. Lucien's hands curled into fists tight enough that his knuckles cracked. "Who?" "Still working on it. But boss, there's more. Her lawyer, Chen. He stopped returning her calls 2 months ago. When she showed up at his office, security turned her away. I checked his financials. He received a wire transfer for $50,000 the day before he dropped her case." The pieces fell into place with the inexorable precision of bullets loading into a chamber. Someone had stolen Elena's settlement. Someone had cut off her legal support. Someone had made sure she had nowhere to go, no money to survive, no way to fight back. Someone inside his own organization. "Find them," Lucien said, his voice dropping to something barely human. "Every single person involved. I want names, addresses, family members, everything." Vincent nodded once. "What do you want done with them when we find them?" Lucien looked back toward the medical suite where Elena lay unconscious, pregnant with his child. So malnourished her bones showed through her skin. "Nothing yet," he said quietly. "First, I want to know why. I want to know who ordered it and why they thought they could touch what's mine and live." "And then?" Then Lucien smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made hardened killers nervous. "Then I'm going to teach this city what happens when you make me angry." Inside the medical suite, Elena's eyes fluttered open. The ceiling was white, expensive white, the kind of white that came from Italian marble and custom paint jobs, and money so old it didn't need to prove anything. She knew that ceiling, panic hit like ice water. Elena tried to sit up, but her body refused to cooperate. Everything hurt. Her head, her stomach, her arms where IV lines pulled at her skin. Monitors beeped around her in sterile rhythm. The smell of antiseptic filled her nose. "Easy." Dr. Chen appeared in her field of vision, pressing a gentle hand against her shoulder. "Don't try to move yet. You've been through a lot." Elena's voice came out as a croak. "Where?" "You're safe. That's what matters right now." Safe. The word was a joke. There was no such thing as safe in Lucien Moreau's world. "The baby." Elena's hand shot to her stomach, finding the small swell still there beneath a hospital gown she didn't remember putting on. "Is the baby a sauce?" "The baby is fine," Dr. Chen assured her, her professional mask slipping just enough to show genuine relief. "Strong heartbeat, normal development. You got very lucky, Elena." "Lucky." "Another joke." Elena closed her eyes, trying to piece together fragmented memories. The bus stop, the rain, the darkness swallowing her whole. And then, nothing. Just a blank space where consciousness should have been. "How did I get here?" Dr. Chen hesitated, exchanging a glance with one of the nurses. Mr. Moreau found you. He brought you here personally. The room tilted. No. Elena shook her head, ignoring the way it made the world spin. No, that's not… He can't. We're divorced. Perhaps you should discuss that with him directly. Dr. Chen checked one of the monitors, adjusting the IV drip. He's right outside. Would you like me to… No. The word came out sharp, desperate. I don't want to see him. I need to leave. I need to… Elena. Dr. Chen's voice went firm, the kind of firm that came from years of dealing with difficult patients. You're severely malnourished, dehydrated. If you'd been out there much longer, you and the baby both could have died. You're not going anywhere until you're stable. You don't understand. Elena tried again to sit up, and this time made it halfway before dizziness forced her back down. He's dangerous. I can't be here. I can't… The door opened, and Lucien walked in. He'd changed clothes, the soaked suit replaced with black slacks and a crisp white shirt rolled up at the sleeves. But he still looked like something carved from ice and violence. His dark eyes locked onto Elena with an intensity that made her breath catch. Leave us, he said to Dr. Chen without looking away from Elena's face. Mr. Moreau, my patient needs 5 minutes. His voice dropped to something that wasn't quite a threat, but wasn't far off. Then you can come back and finish whatever medical miracles you're working. 5 minutes. Dr. Chen clearly wanted to argue, but she was also smart enough to know when she was outmatched. She gave Elena one last reassuring look, then shepherded the nurses out of the room, closing the door behind them with a soft click. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Lucien stood at the foot of the bed, hands in his pockets, looking at Elena like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. How long? Elena's throat went dry. How long what? How long were you on the streets? She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. I don't know, 3 weeks? Maybe 4? Before that? Shelters, when I could get a bed. And before that? Does it matter? The words came out bitter, sharp. You got what you wanted? We're divorced? I'm out of your life. Why do you even care? Something dangerous flickered in Lucien's eyes. The settlement. The 2 million. What happened to it? Elena laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. You're asking me? Your lawyers took it, or someone did. The accounts were empty when I tried to access them. My lawyer stopped returning my calls, and when I tried to fight it, I got shut down at every turn. You should have called me. I did! The words exploded out of her, months of rage and fear and desperation finally breaking through. I called you 17 times, Lucien, 17. You never answered, not once. I never got… He stopped mid-sentence, his expression going very still. Show me your phone. What? Your phone. Show it to me. Elena wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him to go to hell and leave her alone and stop looking at her like she mattered when they both knew she didn't. But something in his voice made her reach for the plastic bag on the bedside table where her belongings had been stored. Her phone was barely functional, the cracked screen held together with tape, but it still turned on. She pulled up the call log with shaking hands and held it out. Lucien took it, scrolling through the list of outgoing calls, all to his number, all marked as completed, all showing duration times of 30 seconds to a minute. But he'd never received a single one. His jaw tightened. These went to voicemail. No, they didn't. Someone answered. A man. He said you were busy. He said you'd call back. Elena's voice cracked. You never did. Lucien's grip on the phone tightened until Elena heard the screen crack further. What did he sound like? This man who answered. I don't know. Professional? Cold? He had an accent? Maybe Eastern European? Dmitri? Elena blinked. Who? But Lucien wasn't talking to her anymore. He was already moving toward the door, pulling out his own phone, his entire body radiating the kind of cold fury that preceded violence. He stopped at the threshold, looking back at her one last time. You're staying here, he said flatly, under guard, under medical supervision, and you're not leaving until I find out exactly who tried to kill my child. Lucien. But he was already gone, the door closing behind him with terrible finality. Elena lay back against the pillows, heart pounding, trapped in the glass tower she'd once called home. Trapped with the man who destroyed her, who saved her, who now knew she was carrying his child. And God help anyone who'd tried to take that away from him. The penthouse was silent in the way expensive places always were. Soundproofed walls swallowing every noise until even breathing felt too loud. Elena lay in the medical suite bed, watching dawn break over Chicago through floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city into a watercolor painting of gold and shadow. The IV drip in her arm had been going for 6 hours now. She could feel strength creeping back into her limbs, slow and grudging, like her body didn't trust this sudden reversal of fortune. Dr. Chen had checked on her twice during the night, taking vitals, adjusting medications, speaking in the calm, professional tones of someone who'd learned not to ask questions about the kinds of patients who showed up in Lucien Moreau's private medical suite. The second time, she'd brought food, plain chicken broth, crackers, ginger tea, and stood over Elena like a prison guard until every drop was consumed. Slow sips, Dr. Chen had instructed. Your stomach's been empty too long. We need to reintroduce food carefully, or you'll just vomit it back up. Elena had obeyed, even though the broth tasted like salted cardboard and her stomach cramped with every swallow. Because the baby needed it, because she'd already failed at keeping herself safe, and she'd be damned if she failed at this too. Now, with early morning light painting the walls, Elena tested her strength by sitting up. The room spun briefly, then steadied. Better. Not good, but better. She needed to leave. That thought had been circling her mind since the moment Lucien walked out the door, vibrating with barely controlled rage. She knew that look, had seen it before during the worst months of their marriage when business deals went sideways or someone challenged his authority. It was the look that preceded violence, the kind of cold fury that meant someone was about to die badly, and she couldn't be here when it happened. Elena swung her legs over the side of the bed, testing her weight. Her knees shook but held. The IV line pulled at her arm. She reached for the tape securing it, fingers clumsy and weak. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Elena's head snapped up. A woman stood in the doorway, mid-30s, sharp-featured, wearing a black pantsuit that screamed either lawyer or bodyguard. Her dark hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her eyes held the kind of cold assessment that came from years of evaluating threats. Who are you? Sophia Reyes, head of Mr. Moreau's security detail. She stepped into the room with the fluid grace of someone who knew how to kill efficiently. I've been assigned to watch you. I don't need a babysitter. Dr. Chen disagrees, so does Mr. Moreau. Sophia crossed her arms, settling into a position that blocked the only exit. You're not leaving this room without medical clearance. You can't keep me prisoner here. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Sophia's face. Can't I? Elena's hands curled into fists. I'm not his property anymore. We're divorced. He has no right to... You're carrying his child. Sophia's voice went flat, factual. That gives him every right he needs. And considering someone just tried to kill you both by stealing your settlement and leaving you to starve, I'd say protective custody is the least of your concerns right now. The words hit like a slap. Elena sank back against the pillows, feeling the fight drain out of her. Because Sophia was right. Someone had deliberately, methodically destroyed every safety net Elena had. Someone had wanted her dead. Who was it? Elena's voice came out small, frightened. Who took the money? Mr. Moreau is finding out as we speak. What does that mean? Sophia's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. It means you should probably try to get some more rest. The evasion was answer enough. Elena closed her eyes, not wanting to imagine what Lucien was doing in whatever dark corner of the city he'd disappeared to. Not wanting to acknowledge the small, traitorous part of her that felt relief knowing someone was finally fighting for her, even if that someone was a monster. Twike. Across the city, in a warehouse that officially didn't exist on any zoning map, Lucien stood in front of a man zip-tied to a metal chair. Dmitry Volkov had been with Lucien's organization for 4 years, handled communications, managed secure phone lines, filtered incoming calls to prioritize what needed Lucien's immediate attention. He was efficient, discreet, and had just made the fatal mistake of answering 17 phone calls from Elena and telling her Lucien was too busy to talk. Blood dripped from Dmitry's split lip onto the concrete floor. Vincent stood to Lucien's left, holding a tablet that showed financial records, phone logs, and surveillance footage that painted a very clear picture of betrayal. To his right, Marco waited with a medical kit, not to save lives, but to make sure Dmitri stayed conscious through whatever came next. "Tell me again," Lucian said quietly. "Who paid you?" Dmitri's head lolled forward. One eye was swollen shut. His breathing came in wet, labored gasps. "I told you, I don't know names. It was all anonymous transfers, cryptocurrency." "You're lying." I swear on my—" Lucian's fist caught him across the jaw before he could finish. The chair rocked backward, would have tipped over if Vincent hadn't caught it. "Don't!" Lucian's voice dropped to something barely human. "Don't swear on anything. Don't insult me with your desperate little oaths. You intercepted calls from my wife. You stole $2 million from accounts under my protection. You left a pregnant woman to die on the streets. So before you swear on anything holy, remember that I'm going to hurt you worse than anything divine ever could." Dmitri spat blood. "She was just supposed to disappear. Go back to wherever she came from. Nobody said anything about her being pregnant. But you knew she was vulnerable." Lucien crouched down, bringing himself eye level with Dmitri. "You knew she had no family, no support system. You knew that cutting off her money would leave her with nothing." "I was following orders." "Whose orders?" Silence. Lucien stood, nodding to Vincent. His fingers. "Start with the left hand." Wait. Dmitri's words came out in a panicked rush as Vincent produced a pair of bolt cutters from a nearby table. Okay. It was Konstantin Fedorov. He's the one who set it up." The name hit Lucien like a punch to the gut. Konstantin Fedorov. His uncle. His father's younger brother. The man who'd helped raise him after his parents died in a car accident that probably wasn't an accident. The man who'd stood beside him when Lucien took over the family business at 25. The man he'd trusted with his life for almost a decade. "You're lying." "I'm not. I swear. Check the accounts. The shell companies. They all trace back to businesses Konstantin controls." Dmitri was crying now, tears mixing with blood. "He said you were getting weak. Said Elena was making you soft. Said the organization needed leadership that understood the stakes." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Boss." "I know." Lucian's voice came out dead, empty. "I know." He'd suspected. Of course he had. You didn't survive in this world without developing a sixth sense for betrayal. But suspecting and knowing were two very different things. Suspicion left room for doubt, for reconciliation, for the possibility of being wrong. Knowing meant war. "What about the lawyer?" Lucien asked. "Chen." "Who got to him?" "Konstantin handled that directly. Paid him off. Threatened his family. Standard intimidation." Dmitri's words tumbled out faster now, desperate to prove his usefulness. "There are others too, people in your organization. Konstantin's been building a faction for months. He's planning what?" Dmitri hesitated. Vincent stepped forward with the bolt cutters. "A coup!" The word exploded out of Dmitri like a confession ripped from his soul. "He's planning a coup. He thinks you've lost your edge. He's been telling people you're distracted, that you care more about your ex-wife than the business. He wanted Elena gone so you'd have nothing left to fight for except the empire. Except by then, it wouldn't be yours anymore." The warehouse went absolutely silent except for Dmitri's labored breathing. Lucien stood very still, processing. His uncle, his blood, had orchestrated Elena's destruction not out of random cruelty, but as a strategic move in a play for power. Had stolen from her, isolated her, left her to die, all to break Lucien down into something that could be controlled or replaced. And it had almost worked. If Elena had died on those streets, if the baby had died with her, Lucien would have become exactly what Konstantin wanted. A hollow, broken thing consumed by rage and guilt, easy to manipulate or destroy. "How many?" Lucien's voice came out cold, clinical. "How many people in my organization are working with Konstantin?" "I don't know exact numbers, maybe 15, 20. He's been careful, only recruiting people he trusts." "Names." "I can give you some. Not all. Konstantin compartmentalized everything, but I know about the ones in communications. A few in security. Someone in your legal team. Write them down." Vincent shoved a notepad and pen at Dmitri. "Every single name you know, every location, every detail." While Dmitri scribbled with shaking hands, Lucien pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 3 months. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. Lucien. Uncle. The word tasted like poison. We need to talk. A pause, then, carefully. About? Elena. Another pause, longer this time. Lucien could almost hear the calculations happening on the other end. Constantine weighing his options, deciding whether to play innocent or go on the offensive. I heard you found her, Constantine said finally. Is she all right? No thanks to you. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't! Lucien's voice cut like a blade. Don't insult us both by pretending. I know about the money, the lawyer, the phone calls. I know everything, Constantine. Silence. Then a sigh. It wasn't personal, Lucien. It was business. Business. Lucien laughed, and it sounded like something breaking. You tried to kill my child, and you're calling it business? I didn't know she was pregnant. If I had, it wouldn't have mattered. You wanted her gone. You wanted me vulnerable. So you orchestrated her destruction like it was just another deal. I wanted you focused. Constantine's voice hardened, losing the pretense of family warmth. You were falling apart, Lucien. Distracted. Making mistakes. That girl was poison to you, to the organization. Everything started falling apart when you married her. So you decided to fix it by committing treason. Treason? Constantine laughed. This is a criminal empire, nephew, not a kingdom. There's no treason here. Just survival. And you were becoming a liability. Was. Lucien's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. Past tense, interesting choice of words. You know what I mean. I do. Which is why I'm giving you one chance, Uncle. 1. Surrender. Confess to the full council. Name everyone involved in your little coup. Do that, and I'll make it quick. And if I don't, then I'll make it slow. And I'll make sure everyone who helped you dies screaming. The line went dead. Lucien lowered the phone, his hand absolutely steady despite the rage burning through his veins. Behind him, Dmitri had finished writing. The list contained 19 names. What do you want done with him? Vincent gestured to Dmitri. Lucien looked at the man who'd intercepted Elena's desperate calls, who'd helped orchestrate her destruction, who'd played a supporting role in almost killing his child. Make it hurt, he said quietly, then make it permanent. Vincent nodded. And Constantine? Constantine is mine. Met. Back at the penthouse, Elena was trying to eat lunch when she heard raised voices from somewhere in the main living area. Don't care what the doctor said, she needs to know. Mr. Moreau was very clear about, Sophia, with all due respect, this is above your pay grade. Elena pushed herself out of bed, ignoring Sophia's immediate protest. The security chief had been sitting in a chair by the window, reading something on her phone. Now she was on her feet, moving to intercept. Mrs. Moreau, it's Vele, Elena corrected automatically, and I'm not staying in that bed while people argue about me in the next room. She made it to the door before Sophia could stop her, stepping out into the hallway just in time to see Vincent Torres in heated conversation with Dr. Chen. They both froze when they saw her. What's happening? Elena demanded. Vincent and Dr. Chen exchanged glances. Finally, Vincent spoke. Perhaps you should sit down. I've been sitting for 12 hours. Tell me what's happening. It's about the settlement, about who took your money. Vincent's jaw tightened. We found out who was responsible. Elena's heart started pounding. Who? Konstantin Fedorov, Lucien's uncle. The name meant nothing to her. During her marriage, Lucien had kept her carefully separated from the uglier parts of his business. She'd met some people, guards, drivers, the occasional business associate at formal dinners, but never anyone important enough to remember. I don't understand. Why would his uncle? He's planning a takeover. Constantine wants to replace Lucien as head of the organization. You were collateral damage. Vincent's expression was grim. He wanted you gone so Lucien would be vulnerable. Elena felt her knees go weak. Sophia caught her elbow, steadying her. Where is Lucien now? Elena heard herself ask. Handling it. Handling it how? Vincent didn't answer, which was answer enough. Elena pressed a hand to her stomach, feeling the small swell beneath the hospital gown. People are going to die. Yes. The blunt honesty was almost worse than a lie would have been. Elena sank into the nearest chair, trying to process. Someone had tried to kill her baby. Not directly, but the result would have been the same. And now Lucien was out there doing what he did best, destroying anyone who threatened what was his. How many people were involved? She asked quietly. At least 20 that we know of. Could be more. 20 people, 20 deaths, all because she'd been foolish enough to fall in love with a crime lord and naive enough to think she could leave that world behind. He can't. Elena stopped, because of course he could. This was Lucien. Violence was his native language. There has to be another way. There isn't. Vincent's voice was flat, final. This is how our world works. Constantine committed treason. Everyone who helped him signed their own death warrants the moment they chose his side. And what about me? The words came out sharper than intended. What happens when Lucien finishes his revenge and remembers I'm the reason it all started? You think he blames you? Doesn't he? Elena looked up, meeting Vincent's eyes. Your boss said it himself. I made him weak. I was the distraction. If I'd never existed, none of this would be happening. If you'd never existed, Vincent said carefully, Lucien would still be the same cold, calculating machine he was before he met you, and Constantine would have found some other excuse to make his move. This isn't about you, Elena. It's about power. It's always about power. Before Elena could respond, the penthouse's private elevator chimed. Everyone went still. The doors opened and Lucien stepped out. He looked like he'd walked through a war zone. His white shirt was splattered with blood that definitely wasn't his own. His knuckles were split and raw. There was a coldness in his eyes that Elena had only seen a few times during their marriage, always before he disappeared for days and came back quieter, darker, like he'd left pieces of his humanity somewhere he could never retrieve them. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The air felt thick enough to choke on. Then Lucien crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, dropping to his knees in front of Elena's chair with the kind of surrender that didn't match anything she knew about him. Are you all right? His hands hovered near her face, not quite touching, like he was afraid she'd shatter. Did Dr. Chen clear you? Are you... I'm fine. Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. The baby's fine. We're both fine. Something in his expression cracked. Relief, maybe. Or fear. Or some terrible combination of both. Lucien. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Vincent told me. About your uncle. About the coup. His jaw tightened. You don't need to worry about that. Don't I? 20 people are going to die because of me, not because of you. His voice went hard. Because they chose treason. Because they tried to hurt you and our child. This isn't your fault, Elena. Isn't it? She pulled back, putting distance between them. Be honest with me. For once, just be honest. Did I make you weak? Did our marriage compromise you? Lucien stood, turning away from her. He walked to the windows, looking out over the city like he could find answers written in the skyline. Yes, he said finally. The word hit like a bullet. You made me weak, Lucien continued, his voice quiet but clear. You made me care about something besides power and survival. You made me want things I had no business wanting, a normal life, a family, some kind of future that didn't end in blood. He turned back to face her. So yes, Elena, you made me weak, and Constantine saw it, and he exploited it. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. Then why bring me back here? Why not just let me disappear like he wanted? Because I'd rather be weak and have you than strong and empty. The words came out rough, like they were being torn from somewhere deep inside him. Because the moment I saw you unconscious on that bench, I realized I'd made a mistake. I divorced you to protect you, but all I did was leave you vulnerable to the same people I was trying to shield you from. So this is guilt, Elena said bitterly. You're keeping me here out of guilt. I'm keeping you here because you're pregnant with my child, because someone tried to kill you both, and because... He stopped, jaw clenching. Because what? Because I still love you. The confession came out quiet, almost broken. I never stopped. I just convinced myself that loving you was selfish, that keeping you close would get you killed. Turns out, pushing you away almost accomplished the same thing. Elena's hands shook. She pressed them against her stomach, feeling the small life growing there. The baby that had survived starvation, exposure, and deliberate cruelty. The baby that was half her and half the man currently looking at her like she was the only thing keeping him human. "I don't know if I can do this again," she whispered. "Trust you. Trust that you won't just push me away the moment things get dangerous." "Things are always dangerous. That's never going to change." "I know, which is why I can't—" "I'm not asking you to decide right now." Lucian crossed back to her, crouching down so they were eye level. "I'm asking you to stay. Let me protect you. Let me take care of you and the baby. And when this is over, when Constantine and everyone who helped him are gone, then you can decide." "Decide what?" "Whether you want to give us another chance, or whether you want to take the settlement you should have had and build a life somewhere far away from all this." Elena searched his face, looking for lies, for manipulation, for any sign that this was just another chess move in whatever game he was playing. But all she saw was exhaustion, desperation, and something that looked dangerously like hope. "And if I choose to leave?" she asked quietly. "After all this? What then?" Pain flickered across his expression. "Then I let you go. No tricks, no interference, just a clean break. You and the baby, safe and provided for." "You'd give up custody? Just like that?" "I'd never give up my child." His voice hardened. "But I'd work out an arrangement that didn't trap you in this world. Visits, video calls, whatever you'd allow that would let me be a father without forcing you to be part of this life." It sounded reasonable, rational, almost too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But Elena was tired. Tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of trying to survive on nothing but stubborn pride and increasingly desperate prayers to a universe that seemed determined to grind her into dust. "Okay," she heard herself say, "I'll stay. For now." Relief flooded Lucian's face. He reached for her hand, then stopped, like he wasn't sure he had the right to touch her anymore. Elena made the decision for him, placing her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid, and stained with someone else's blood. Meg. 3 days passed in strange, suspended tension. Elena stayed in the penthouse's guest wing, not the master suite she'd once shared with Lucian, but a smaller, sun-filled room with its own bathroom and sitting area. Dr. Chen visited twice daily, monitoring her recovery, adjusting her nutrition plan, running ultrasounds to make sure the baby was thriving despite everything. The baby was fine, growing, strong. Elena tried not to think too hard about what that meant. Lucien was gone more often than not, disappearing for hours at a time and returning with that same cold, distant look that meant someone had died on his orders. He never told her details, and she never asked. But she saw it in the way his security team moved through the penthouse. Tighter formations, more weapons visible. An atmosphere of siege readiness that hadn't been there during their marriage. The war had started. On the third night, Elena woke to the sound of shouting. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, trying to orient herself. The penthouse was dark except for the city lights filtering through the windows. The shouting came from somewhere deeper in the apartment. Lucien's office, maybe. She shouldn't investigate. She should stay in bed, stay safe, stay out of whatever violent business was unfolding in the next room. But she'd never been good at following her own sensible advice. Elena pulled on a robe and padded barefoot into the hallway. The shouting got louder as she approached Lucian's office. She could make out individual voices now. Lucian's cold and controlled, Vincent's urgent and warning, and a third voice she didn't recognize. "Can't keep doing this, Lucien. The council is getting nervous." "The council can be nervous. I'm cleaning house." "You're starting a war. Constantine has support, real support. If you push too hard, if I don't push hard enough, he wins. Is that what you want, Marcus?" "I want stability. I want the organization intact when this is over." "The organization will be intact, just with different people running it." Elena reached the office door, which stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could see Lucien standing behind his desk, still wearing a blood-stained shirt. Vincent was there too, along with 2 other men she didn't recognize. "You're being reckless," the man called Marcus said. "This obsession with protecting your ex-wife. Careful. Lucien's voice dropped to something deadly. Very careful how you finish that sentence. I'm just saying, maybe Constantine had a point. Maybe you are distracted. Maybe Lucien moved faster than Elena could track. One moment he was behind the desk. The next, he had Marcus slammed against the wall, one hand wrapped around his throat. Finish it, Lucien said quietly. I want to hear you say it. Marcus choked, face going red. I wasn't. You weren't what? Suggesting I'm compromised? Suggesting Elena is a weakness? Suggesting I should have let her die? Lucien's grip tightened. Because if that's what you're suggesting, Marcus, then maybe you're on the wrong side of this coup. Boss. Vincent stepped forward, hand on Lucien's shoulder. He's not worth it. We need him for the council vote. For a long moment, Lucien didn't move. Then, slowly, he released Marcus, letting the man slide down the wall, gasping for air. Get out, Lucien said. And when you cast your vote at the council meeting, remember that I'm the one keeping this organization from tearing itself apart. Not Constantine. Me. Marcus scrambled for the door, not bothering to hide his fear. He shoved past Elena without even seeing her, too focused on escape to register her presence. The other man, Poirot, younger, with sharp features and calculating eyes, glanced at Elena, then back at Lucien. We'll talk tomorrow, he said carefully, after you've had time to cool down. He left more slowly, nodding to Vincent on his way out, which left just Lucien, Vincent, and Elena standing in the charged silence. Lucien saw her first. Something in his expression shifted, the cold mask cracking just enough to show exhaustion underneath. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. Elena stepped into the office, wrapping her arms around herself. Who was that? Marcus Delgado, council member, fence sitter. Lucien turned away, pouring himself a drink from the bar cart, trying to figure out which side is going to win before committing. And you're trying to scare him into loyalty. I'm trying to show him what happens to people who underestimate me. Elena watched him down the whiskey in one swallow. Is it working? Guess we'll find out at the vote. What vote? Vincent cleared his throat. The council meets in 4 days. They'll decide whether to support Lucien's leadership or call for new elections. If they call for elections, Constantine becomes a legitimate candidate. If they support Lucien, Constantine becomes a traitor and anyone helping him gets executed. So everything comes down to politics, Elena said slowly. After all this violence, all these deaths, it's just a vote. It's never just a vote. Lucien set down his glass with controlled precision. It's power. It's legitimacy. It's the difference between me being the rightful head of this organization or becoming the same kind of traitor I'm hunting. And if you lose, I won't. But if you do. Lucien finally looked at her, really looked at her, with eyes so dark they could have been carved from obsidian. Then you take the money in the offshore account I'm setting up, you take our child, and you run somewhere I can never find you. Because if I lose this vote, Elena, I'll be dead within 24 hours. The words hung in the air like smoke. Elena felt her breath catch. You're that certain? Constantine doesn't take prisoners. Neither do I. Lucien crossed to her, stopping just close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath, the copper tang of blood still lingering on his clothes. Which is why I need you to promise me something. What? If this goes sideways, if something happens to me, you don't try to be brave, you don't try to negotiate, you just run. Lucien, promise me, Elena. His hands came up to frame her face, touched gentle despite the violence those same hands had committed hours earlier. Promise me you'll protect our child, even if it means leaving me behind. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she wouldn't abandon him, that they'd find another way, that surely there was some solution that didn't end in his death or her flight. But she'd been in his world long enough to know those were fairy tale endings. This world didn't do happy. It did survival. I promise, she whispered. Lucien's thumb traced her cheekbone, the gesture almost unbearably tender. Then he pulled away, the mask sliding back into place. Vincent will take you back to your room. I can walk myself. Vincent will take you. Not a request. I have work to do. Elena wanted to protest, wanted to demand he stop shutting her out, wanted to scream that she was tired of being protected like some fragile thing that might shatter. But the look in his eyes stopped her. He was already shutting down, already compartmentalizing, already becoming the cold, ruthless creature that could sentence men to death without flinching. And she couldn't reach that version of him. Nobody could. So she let Vincent guide her back to her room, let him check the locks and sweep for threats, let him treat her like the precious cargo she'd somehow become in this insane war. But sleep didn't come. Elena lay in bed, one hand on her stomach, feeling the baby move for the first time. Just a flutter, barely there, but unmistakably real. Life, growing inside her. Life that depended on her making the right choices. And tomorrow, she would have to decide if staying in Lucien's world was the right choice, or if protection and violence and blood-soaked love were just different forms of destruction. Check. The next morning, Elena woke to find Sophia waiting outside her door with a garment bag. "What's this?" "Mr. Moreau requested you have appropriate clothing." Sophia's expression gave nothing away. "He'd like you to join him for breakfast." Elena took the garment bag warily. Inside was a simple but expensive maternity dress in deep blue, still bearing designer tags. Shoes, a cashmere wrap, the kind of clothes she used to wear when she was Mrs. Moreau. She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell Sophia to take the expensive gifts back to wherever they came from and inform Lucien that she wasn't a doll to be dressed up. But the clothes she'd been found in were gone, destroyed probably, too filthy to salvage. And the hospital gown was hardly appropriate for whatever conversation Lucien wanted to have. So she showered, dressed in the two soft fabrics that smelled like new money, and let Sophia escort her to the penthouse's formal dining room. Lucien was already there, seated at the head of a table that could easily accommodate 12. He'd changed clothes, dark slacks, black button-down, no tie, and looked almost normal if you didn't notice the fresh bruises on his knuckles or the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair beside him, not at the other end of the table, like they'd done during the worst parts of their marriage. Beside him. Elena sat. A woman in chef's whites appeared with plates, eggs, toast, fruit, yogurt, all carefully arranged and appropriately portioned for someone recovering from malnutrition. "Eat," Lucien instructed. "Dr. Chen will have my head if you skip meals." Elena picked up her fork, more out of habit than hunger. "You wanted to talk." "I wanted to see you." He took a sip of coffee. "It's been 3 days. We've barely spoken." "You've been busy." "Killing traitors." "Yes." No apology in his voice, no shame. "But that doesn't mean I haven't been thinking about you." Elena ate a bite of eggs. They tasted like ash. "What happens at this council meeting?" "I present evidence of Constantine's treason. The council votes on whether to support my continued leadership or call for elections. And if they call for elections, then Constantine and I both make our case for why we should lead the organization. It becomes a political campaign, could take weeks, could turn into civil war. And if they support you, then Constantine is officially declared a traitor. His assets are seized, his allies are given the chance to denounce him or die with him." Lucien set down his coffee cup. "It becomes very simple, very fast." "Simple," Elena repeated. "You make it sound clean." "It won't be clean, but it will be final." She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the man beneath the monster for the first time in months. He looked tired, more tired than she'd ever seen him, like carrying the weight of an empire built on violence was finally crushing him into something he didn't want to be. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "This life, this world, all of it." Lucien was silent for a long moment, then, "Every day." The honesty surprised her. "But regret doesn't change anything," he continued. "This is who I am, what I am. I can wish I was someone different, someone better, but wishing doesn't rebuild the world from scratch. So you're just trapped." "We're all trapped, Elena. You, me, everyone in this organization. We're all trapped by choices we made years ago, by violence that demands more violence, by a system that doesn't forgive weakness." He turned to face her fully. "The only question is whether we're trapped alone or trapped together." "That's not a real choice. It's the only choice I have left to offer you." Elena set down her fork, appetite gone. What if I don't want either option? What if I want something completely different? Then tell me what it looks like, and I'll move heaven and earth to give it to you. I want normal. The words came out fierce, desperate. I want a life where my child doesn't grow up surrounded by armed guards and blood money. I want to not be afraid every time you leave the apartment that you won't come back. I want to be able to trust that the people around us aren't planning coups or intercepting phone calls or stealing money meant to keep me alive. That's not possible in my world. Then maybe I don't want to be in your world anymore. The words hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Lucien's expression went very still. You're leaving. I don't know. Elena pressed a hand to her stomach. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know I can't keep living like this, waiting for the next disaster, the next betrayal, the next time someone decides I'm a useful target. I can protect you. Protect. You couldn't protect me from your own uncle. The words exploded out of her, months of fear and anger finally breaking through. You divorced me to keep me safe, and I ended up starving on the streets. You brought me back here to protect me, and now there's a price on your head. Everything you do to keep me safe just makes me a bigger target. Lucien flinched like she'd slapped him. So tell me, Elena continued, voice shaking, how is staying here any different from waiting for the next person who wants to hurt you to decide I'm the easiest way to do it? Because this time, I'll see it coming. Will you? You didn't see Constantine coming. You didn't see the coup. You didn't know your own people were working against you. That won't happen again. How can you possibly promise that? Because I'll burn this entire organization to the ground before I let anyone hurt you again. The words came out savage, raw. I'll kill every last person who even thinks about touching you. I'll turn this city into a war zone. I'll become exactly the monster everyone already thinks I am. Whatever it takes, Elena. Whatever it fucking takes. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena stared at him, seeing the truth written all over his face. He meant it. Every word. He would absolutely destroy everything he'd built, everything he'd become, if it meant keeping her and their child safe. And that terrified her more than anything else. Because a man willing to burn the world for you was also a man capable of burning you when the world inevitably fought back. I need air, she whispered, pushing back from the table. Elena, don't. Just don't. She fled the dining room before he could stop her, before she could see the devastation in his eyes, before she could make the mistake of staying when every instinct screamed that loving Lucien Moreau was choosing beautiful destruction over ugly survival. Sophia followed at a discreet distance as Elena made her way through the penthouse to the private terrace that wrapped around the entire floor. The morning air was cold, sharp, clearing her head like a slap. Chicago spread out below her in all directions. Millions of people living normal lives, having normal problems, building futures that didn't require armed guards and blood oaths and council votes to determine whether they lived or died. She wanted that. God, she wanted that so badly it hurt. But her hand rested on her stomach, on the baby growing there, and she knew with terrible certainty that normal was already impossible. This child would be Lucien Moreau's daughter. No amount of distance or money or desperate hope would change that simple fact. Mrs. Moreau? Elena turned to find Vincent standing in the terrace doorway. It's Vale, she said automatically. Vincent Torres. He stepped onto the terrace, hands in his pockets, looking almost uncomfortable. I wanted to talk to you, if that's all right. Does Lucien know you're here? He sent me. Of course he did. Elena turned back to the view. I'm not changing my mind. I'm not here to convince you of anything. Vincent came to stand beside her, close enough to talk, but not so close as to feel threatening. I'm here to tell you something Lucien won't say himself. What's that? He's scared. Elena laughed bitterly. Lucien doesn't get scared. He's terrified. Vincent continued like she hadn't spoken. I've worked for him for 8 years. I've seen him face down cartels, negotiate with sociopaths, walk into situations where death was guaranteed and come out the other side covered in blood and smiling. I've never seen him scared. Not once. Until now. Until you. Vincent's voice was quiet. He thinks he's going to lose you, and that scares him more than any bullet ever could. Good. Maybe he should be scared. Maybe. But I need you to understand something, Elena. The man you married, the one who divorced you to protect you, He was trying to do the right thing. He was trying to give you a life free from all this. Vincent gestured at the city below them. It didn't work, obviously, but the intention was real. Intention doesn't mean much when I ended up homeless and pregnant. No, it doesn't. Vincent was quiet for a moment. But here's what you need to know. Lucien is about to fight the biggest battle of his life. In 4 days, the council votes. And if they don't support him, if Constantine wins, then everyone in this building becomes a target, including you, including your baby. Elena's blood went cold. You're saying I'm safer with him. I'm saying you're already in this whether you want to be or not. The moment Constantine found out you were pregnant, the moment he decided to use you as a weapon against Lucien, you became a permanent part of this war. Running won't change that. Distance won't change that. The only thing that changes anything is making sure Lucien wins. And if he loses? Vincent's expression went hard. Then we all die. Simple as that. He left her alone on the terrace, the weight of his words settling over her like a burial shroud. Elena stood there for a long time, watching the sun climb higher over Chicago, watching the city wake up and go about its business, while she tried to figure out how to survive in a world where love and violence were so tangled together she couldn't tell them apart anymore. Finally, she went back inside, found Lucien in his office, surrounded by papers and photos and the organized chaos of planning a war. He looked up when she entered, expression guarded. "I'll stay," Elena said before she could change her mind. "For now, until the vote, until we know if you're going to survive this." Relief flooded his face. "Elena, but I need something from you." "Anything. The truth. No more protecting me from the ugly parts. No more hiding what you're doing or who you're killing or how dangerous this really is. If I'm going to be trapped in this world, I need to see it clearly. All of it." Lucien stood, crossing to her. "You might not like what you see." "I already don't like it, but at least I'll know what I'm dealing with." He searched her face, looking for something. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right, the truth. Starting now." "Starting now," Elena confirmed. And that night, after dinner, Lucien took her down to the basement level of the building where he kept the parts of his empire that couldn't exist in daylight. He showed her the interrogation rooms, the holding cells, the places where people disappeared and never came back. He showed her security footage of Constantine meeting with his allies, planning their coup, laughing over drinks while discussing the best ways to eliminate Lucien. He showed her the list of names, 23 people now, not 19, all marked for death. And then, in the cold light of the basement's main holding area, he showed her Dmitri, or what was left of him. The man who'd intercepted Elena's calls was barely recognizable, broken, bleeding. Still technically alive, but only because Lucien hadn't given the order to finish it yet. "This is what I am," Lucien said quietly, standing beside Elena while she stared at the broken thing that used to be human. "This is what I do to people who hurt you. I don't feel bad about it. I don't lose sleep. I just make sure they suffer enough that everyone else thinks twice before trying again." Elena couldn't look away, couldn't process, couldn't reconcile the gentle way Lucien touched her with the brutality on display. "Say something," Lucien said. Elena turned to him, seeing him truly for the first time since they'd met. Monster, protector, lover, killer. All of it true, all of it real. All of it wrapped up in one impossibly complicated man who was staring at her like her opinion mattered more than anything else in the world. "I understand," she whispered. And the truly terrifying thing was, she did. She understood that in Lucien's world, mercy was weakness. Hesitation was death. And the only way to survive was to be more ruthless than everyone else. "I won't ask you to forgive me," Lucien said, "for being what I am, for doing what I do. But I need you to understand that every violent thing I've ever done, I did to protect something. Territory, power, family. And now you and our child. I know. And you're still staying?" Elena looked back at Dmitri one last time, then at the man she'd once loved enough to marry, the man she was choosing to stay with despite everything. "I'm still staying," she confirmed. Lucien exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Then he took her hand and led her back upstairs, away from the darkness, back into the false light of the penthouse, where they could pretend for a few more days that love was enough to survive the coming war. But that night, alone in her room, Elena finally understood the truth. She wasn't staying because she trusted Lucien to protect her. She was staying because she'd already crossed the line. Because seeing Dmitri broken and bleeding should have horrified her, should have sent her running, should have been the final proof that this world would destroy her. Instead, all she felt was cold satisfaction. The man who'd helped steal her future, who'd listened to her desperate calls and lied, who'd played a role in almost killing her baby, was suffering. And she was glad. That realization terrified her more than anything else. Because if she could feel that way about Dmitri, what did that say about who she was becoming? What did that say about the mother she would be? And as she drifted off to sleep with those questions circling her mind like vultures, Elena understood with terrible clarity that she'd already become exactly what Constantine had feared. Not a weakness in Lucian's armor, but another weapon in his arsenal. One he would use without hesitation. One she would let him use. Because in the end, survival meant choosing violence over virtue. And she'd already made her choice. The council meeting was scheduled for 8 p.m. on Thursday at a location that changed 3 times in the 48 hours leading up to it. Standard security protocol, when half the organization was trying to kill the other half. The final location, a private club in the financial district that Lucien's family had owned since the 1950s, was chosen 6 hours before the meeting and communicated only to verified council members through encrypted channels that Vincent personally controlled. Elena wasn't supposed to attend. Lucien had made that crystal clear over breakfast the morning of the vote, his voice carrying that particular edge that meant the decision wasn't up for negotiation. You stay here. Sophia and a full security team stay with you. If anything goes wrong, you run, Elena finished, reciting the plan he'd drilled into her head for 3 straight days. I know, you've told me 100 times. I'm telling you 101. Lucien set down his coffee cup with controlled precision. Because if the vote goes sideways, if Constantine makes a move during the meeting, this building becomes the safest place in Chicago. It's fortified, armed, stocked for a siege. You stay here no matter what. And what about you? I'll handle myself. Elena watched him adjust his tie in the reflection of the window. Charcoal suit, black shirt, no jewelry except the watch his father had left him. He looked like what he was. A man preparing for war while wearing the costume of civilization. How many people will be there? She asked. 13 council members, plus Constantine and me. Security teams outside, but not in the room. Old rules. When council meets, everyone comes unarmed and alone. Keeps things civilized. Civilized, Elena repeated. Right, because everything about this is civilized. Lucien turned to face her, and for just a moment the mask slipped. She saw exhaustion, fear, and something that looked dangerously like goodbye. If this goes wrong, he said quietly, Vincent has instructions, offshore accounts, new identities, safe houses in 3 different countries. He'll get you and the baby somewhere Constantine can never find you. Stop! Elena stood, crossing to him. Stop talking like you're already dead. I'm being realistic. You're being fatalistic. She placed a hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the expensive fabric. You're going to walk into that room. You're going to present your evidence. The council's going to vote in your favor because they're too smart to back a traitor. And then you're going to come home. Elena, shit! That's what's going to happen, Lucien, because the alternative is unacceptable. He looked at her for a long moment, then pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. His lips brushed her forehead. I love you, he whispered. I need you to know that, whatever happens, whatever you think of me after today, I love you. Elena's throat tightened. I know, and I'm sorry. For all of it. For bringing you into this world. For not protecting you better. For being too broken to give you the life you deserve. Lucien, let me finish. His arms tightened around her. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our daughter. And if I don't make it through tonight, I need you to tell her that. When she's old enough to understand, tell her that her father wasn't a good man, but he loved her mother more than anything in this world. Tears burned behind Elena's eyes. You're going to tell her yourself. Maybe. He pulled back, looking at her like he was trying to memorize every detail. But just in case. Then he kissed her, slow and deep and desperate. like he was trying to pour everything he couldn't say into that one point of contact. When he finally pulled away, Elena could taste salt. Didn't know if it was from her tears or his. "Stay safe," Lucien Yen said. "No matter what you hear, no matter what anyone tells you, you stay in this building until Vincent gives you the all clear." "I will. Promise me." "I promise." He studied her face one more time, then turned and walked out of the penthouse without looking back. Elena stood in the empty apartment, listening to the elevator doors close, feeling like she'd just watched him walk toward a firing squad. Sophia appeared in the doorway. "He'll be fine. Lucien always comes out on top." "Does he?" Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "Or does he just survive while everyone around him burns?" Sophia didn't answer, which was answer enough. The hours crawled past like dying things. Elena tried to read, couldn't focus, tried to eat dinner, couldn't stomach more than a few bites. Ended up pacing the penthouse like a caged animal while Sophia watched with the patient wariness of someone used to managing people in crisis. At 7:30, Vincent called to confirm they were en route to the meeting location. At 7:45, he called again to confirm they'd arrived and were conducting security sweeps. At 8 p.m. exactly, when the meeting was supposed to start, Elena's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something, instinct, desperation, the same reckless impulse that had made her fall in love with Lucien in the first place, made her swipe to accept. "Elena Vale?" The voice was male, smooth, with the faintest trace of an accent she couldn't place. "Who is this?" "A friend. Someone who wants to help you." Elena's blood went cold. "I don't know you, but I know you. Quite well, actually. I know you're pregnant with Lucien Moreau's child. I know you're currently staying in his penthouse under armed guard. I know he left approximately 22 minutes ago to attend a council meeting that will determine whether he lives or dies tonight." Her hand tightened on the phone. "What do you want?" "To give you information you need. Information Lucien should have given you himself, but was too much of a coward to share." "I'm hanging up." Konstantin Fedorov didn't orchestrate the coup alone. Elena froze, finger hovering over the end call button. The voice continued, calm and certain. "He had help. From someone Lucien trusts completely, someone who's been feeding Konstantin information for months, someone who's been playing both sides since before you and Lucien even divorced." "You're lying." "Am I?" "Then explain how Konstantin knew exactly when to steal your settlement. Explain how he knew which calls to intercept. Explain how he knew you were pregnant before Lucien did." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Who are you?" "Someone who's tired of watching Lucien Moreau destroy everything he touches. Someone who thinks maybe you deserve the truth before you tie yourself to a sinking ship." "The truth about what? About who really wanted you gone? About who convinced Konstantin that removing you was the key to controlling Lucien? About who's been lying to you since the moment you collapsed on that bus stop? Tell me." The words came out harsh, desperate. "Not over the phone, too easy to trace, but if you're brave enough to hear it, meet me at the address I'm about to send you. Come alone. Come now. And I'll tell you everything." "I can't leave. I promised Lucien. Lucien promised to protect you too. How did that work out?" The voice went sharp, cutting. "You almost died, Elena. Your baby almost died. And the man responsible for that is sitting in a council meeting right now, pretending to be loyal while planning Lucien's execution. Don't you want to know who it is?" The phone buzzed. A text message from the same unknown number. An address in the warehouse district, less than 2 miles away. 20 minutes, the voice said. "That's how long you have before the information becomes worthless. After that, Lucien's fate is sealed and you'll never know the truth." The line went dead. Elena stared at her phone, mind racing. It was obviously a trap. Obviously bait designed to lure her away from the safety of the penthouse. Obviously the exact kind of impulsive, reckless decision that got people killed in Lucien's world. But what if it wasn't? What if there really was a traitor in Lucien's inner circle? Someone feeding information to Konstantin, someone who'd been playing both sides, someone who could destroy everything at the council meeting tonight if she didn't warn Lucien in time. "Everything all right?" Sophia appeared in the doorway, sharp eyes already assessing the situation. Elena shoved her phone in her pocket. Fine, just a spam call. Sophia didn't look convinced but didn't push. I'm going to do a perimeter check. Stay inside, lock the door behind me. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay. The moment Sophia left, Elena was moving. She grabbed her coat, her phone, the emergency cash Lucian kept in the drawer of his office desk. Scribbled a quick note. Had to check something. Back soon. I'm sorry. And left it on the kitchen counter where Sophia would find it. Then she slipped out the service entrance that the household staff used, the one that bypassed the main security checkpoint, the one Lucien had shown her during their marriage, in case she ever needed to leave without questions. The elevator took her down to the garage level. Elena found one of the SUVs, keys in the ignition, because Lucien's people lived in a world where nobody was stupid enough to steal from him, and drove out into the Chicago night. The address led her to a part of the city she didn't recognize. Industrial. Empty. The kind of neighborhood where buildings had more broken windows than intact ones, and streetlights flickered with epileptic uncertainty. She should turn around. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around. But she kept driving, following the GPS until it announced she'd arrived at a warehouse with no signage and no visible lights. Elena parked, killed the engine, and sat in the SUV trying to gather courage that seemed to have abandoned her completely. Her phone buzzed. Come inside. Second floor. Door at the end of the hall. Elena looked at the warehouse, at the darkness, at the obvious wrongness of everything about this situation. Then she thought about Lucian walking into that council meeting, surrounded by people he trusted, not knowing one of them was planning to put a bullet in his head. She got out of the car. The warehouse door was unlocked. Elena pushed it open, wincing at the way it creaked like something from a horror movie. Inside, the air smelled like rust and abandonment. Her footsteps echoed as she crossed to a metal staircase that led to the second floor. Every step up felt like choosing death. At the top, a hallway stretched into darkness. A single door at the end showed light bleeding from underneath. Elena walked toward it, hand pressed to her stomach, whispering silent apologies to her unborn daughter for being this stupid, this reckless, this desperate. She pushed open the door and stopped dead. The room was empty except for a single chair positioned in the center, harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Sitting in the chair, hands zip-tied behind his back, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, was Vincent Torres. Elena. His voice came out rough, pained. You need to run. Right now. Vincent, what? It's a trap. It's all a trap. You need to... The door slammed shut behind her. Elena spun around to find a man she didn't recognize. Tall, lean, with the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms or on magazine covers. Expensive suit, calm smile. Gun pointed directly at her stomach. Elena Vallo, he said pleasantly. Thank you for coming. I'm Marcus Delgado. We met briefly at Lucian's penthouse, though you probably don't remember. She remembered. The council member. The fence-sitter Lucian had slammed against the wall. What is this? Elena's voice shook. Where's the person who called me? That was me, or rather, someone working for me. Voice modulation technology is remarkable these days. Marcus gestured to a second chair that Elena hadn't noticed. Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss before your husband arrives. He's not my husband. We're divorced. A technicality that will be corrected soon enough, I'm sure. Lucien is nothing if not sentimental about his possessions. Marcus's smile widened. Now sit, or I start breaking Vincent's fingers until you comply. Elena looked at Vincent, who shook his head once, a clear warning not to obey. Marcus pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Vincent screamed as the bullet tore through his left shoulder, blood spraying across the concrete floor. Next one goes through his knee, Marcus said conversationally. Then the other shoulder. Then his spine. I can keep him alive and suffering for hours, Elena, or you can sit down and make this easy. Elena sat. Marcus produced another zip tie from his pocket, securing her wrists behind the chair with practiced efficiency. Not tight enough to cut off circulation, but absolutely tight enough to prevent escape. There, he said, stepping back to admire his work. Much better. Now we can talk like civilized people. Fuck you, Vincent spat, blood soaking through his shirt. Lucien is going to do exactly what I want him to do, which is die. Marcus pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. In approximately 15 minutes, Constantine will receive an anonymous tip that Lucian's pregnant ex-wife is being held hostage in this warehouse. He'll share that information with the council, and Lucian, being the predictable, sentimental fool that he is, will abandon the meeting to come save her. Elena's blood turned to ice. You're drawing him into an ambush. I'm removing him from the board. The council vote doesn't matter if Lucien isn't alive to hear the results. And once he's dead, Constantine becomes the de facto leader. At which point I, having proven my loyalty by delivering Lucien's head, will be rewarded with a very lucrative position in the new regime. You're the traitor. Elena's mind raced, trying to understand. You're the one who helped Constantine, who told him about me. Helped is such a limited word. I orchestrated. Constantine wanted power but lacked the strategic vision to take it. I provided that vision. The divorce was already happening, so I simply suggested that making you disappear would destabilize Lucien emotionally. Make him vulnerable. I even arranged for the settlement to be stolen, for your calls to be intercepted. Marcus crouched down in front of Elena, looking pleased with himself. I never expected you to get pregnant. That was a delightful complication. Made everything so much more devastating. You're insane. I'm ambitious. There's a difference. Marcus stood, checking his watch. Constantine should be sharing the news with the council right about now, which means Lucien will be leaving the meeting in 3, 2... His phone buzzed. Marcus looked at the screen and smiled. Right on schedule. He's already moving. Vincent, your boss is charging into my trap like a knight in a bad fairy tale. I'd say you failed in your job of keeping him rational, but honestly, this was always going to be the outcome. Lucien can't help himself. Show him something vulnerable, something he loves, and he abandons all strategy to protect it. Vincent's face had gone pale from blood loss. You won't get away with this. Even if you kill Lucien, his people will hunt you down. His people will work for me. Or they'll die. That's how succession works in our world. Marcus walked to the room's single window, looking out over the warehouse district. I've already secured loyalty from 6 key lieutenants. Promised them better positions, more money, less of Lucien's obsessive micromanagement. By tomorrow morning, anyone still loyal to the old regime will be a liability easily eliminated. Elena tested the zip tie binding her wrists. Too tight. She couldn't slip free without dislocating a thumb, and even then it would take time she didn't have. Why tell us all this? She asked, trying to keep Marcus talking, trying to buy time to think. If you're so confident, why not just kill us and wait for Lucien? Because I want you to understand. Marcus turned back to face her. I want you to know that every choice Lucien made to protect you actually sealed his fate. If he'd stayed cold, stayed focused, stayed the ruthless bastard he used to be, I never would have been able to touch him. But he fell in love. He got weak. And weakness is always fatal in our world. He's going to kill you, Elena said quietly. When he gets here, when he sees what you've done, he's going to tear you apart. He's going to try. I'm counting on it. Marcus pulled out his gun, checking the magazine with casual familiarity. Constantine's men are positioned throughout this building, 30 of them. All armed, all prepared to kill Lucien the moment he walks through that door. He's outnumbered, outgunned, and too emotionally compromised to think clearly. This isn't a rescue mission, Elena. It's a suicide run. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. Lucien was walking into a death trap. And Elena had led him straight to it by being exactly the kind of impulsive, reckless idiot she'd promised not to be. You're going to watch him die, Marcus continued, almost gently. I think that's fitting, don't you? You get to see firsthand what loving Lucien Moreau costs. And then, after he's gone, Constantine will decide what to do with you. Keep you alive as leverage against any remaining loyalists. Or kill you and the baby to eliminate the bloodline completely. Personally, I'm hoping for the latter. Cleaner that way. Please. Elena hated the way her voice broke. Please, I'll do anything. Just let Vincent warn him. Let him know it's a trap. He'll leave. He'll run. He'll come anyway. That's who he is? Marcus's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, then smiled. And he's here. The sound of gunfire erupted from somewhere below them. Automatic weapons, shouting, the distinctive crack of grenades. Marcus walked to the window, watching the chaos unfold in the warehouse below, like it was theater arranged for his entertainment. He brought friends, Marcus noted, sounding almost impressed. Smart. Not smart enough, but smart. More gunfire. Closer now. Elena could hear men screaming, dying, the wet sounds of bodies hitting concrete. Lucien was fighting his way through Constantine's ambush, fighting toward her, fighting to save her from a trap she'd walked into with her eyes wide open. Vincent! Elena turned to where Lucien's head of security sat bleeding, face pale as death. You have to do something. You have to warn him. You have to... I can't. Vincent's voice came out weak. Elena, I'm sorry. I can't. The gunfire grew louder, angrier. Elena could track Lucien's progress by the sound. Methodical, brutal, absolutely relentless. He was cutting through Constantine's men like they were nothing, and Marcus just stood there watching with clinical interest. 15 men dead, Marcus commented. 16. He's better than I gave him credit for. Constantine should have sent more. It's not too late, Elena tried desperately. You can still walk away, take your money, and disappear. Lucien never has to know you. Oko. Elena, stop. Just stop. Marcus turned to face her, and his expression had gone cold. I don't want to walk away. I want to watch him bleed. I want to see the look on his face when he realizes he failed to protect you. I want to take everything from him the way he's taken everything from people like me for years. People like you? People who worked for his father, who built this organization, who got pushed aside when Lucien took over and started running things like his personal kingdom instead of a collective enterprise. Marcus's voice hardened. I've waited 8 years for this. 8 years of pretending to be loyal while watching him parade around like he's entitled to power he inherited through murder. So no, Elena, I'm not walking away. I'm finishing what I started. The gunfire stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Marcus checked his phone. 23 dead. Lucien's still alive. He's on the stairs now, coming up to this floor. Elena's heart hammered so hard she thought her ribs might crack. Marcus positioned himself behind Elena's chair, gun pressed against the back of her head. Here's what's going to happen, he said quietly. Lucien's going to come through that door. He's going to see you. He's going to drop his weapon because that's what men like him do when the woman they love is in danger. And then I'm going to shoot him. Not fatally. Not at first. I want him conscious when I kill you. I want him to feel it. You're a monster, Elena whispered. I'm a businessman. Lucien's the monster. I'm just better at it than he is. Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Running. The door exploded inward, kicked off its hinges. Lucien stood in the doorway, covered in blood that mostly wasn't his, holding a gun in each hand, eyes wild with the kind of rage that preceded mass murder. Those eyes found Elena, found the gun pressed to her head, found Marcus standing behind her, smiling. Hello, Lucien, Marcus said pleasantly. Drop the guns or I paint the wall with her brain. Lucien's hands didn't move. Marcus, I should have known. You should have, but you were too busy playing house with your little project here to notice the knife at your back. Marcus pressed the gun harder against Elena's skull, making her whimper. Guns, on the floor, now, or she dies. For one terrible moment, Elena thought Lucien might refuse, might calculate the odds and decide saving himself was worth sacrificing her, might finally choose survival over sentiment. But his hands opened. The guns clattered to the concrete floor. Good dog, Marcus said. Now kick them away. Lucien obeyed, sending the weapons skittering across the room, putting them out of reach. Marcus smiled. See, Elena? I told you. Predictable. Sentimental. Weak. Let her go. Lucien's voice came out dead calm, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. This is between us. She's got nothing to do with your issues with me. She's got everything to do with it. She's the reason you're soft, the reason you're vulnerable, the reason I can kill you. Marcus gestured with his free hand. On your knees. Lucien didn't move. On your knees or I shoot her in the spine and let her spend the rest of her short life paralyzed. Slowly, maintaining eye contact with Elena the entire time, Lucien sank to his knees. Better, Marcus said. Now you stay right there while I explain how this is going to work. First, I'm going to shoot you in the gut. Painful, but not immediately fatal. Then, I'm going to shoot Vincent in the head because he's bleeding out anyway, and I'm not completely heartless. Then I'm going to shoot Elena in the stomach. Let you watch your child die. After that, Vincent moved. Despite the bullet in his shoulder, despite the blood loss, despite being zip-tied to a chair, Vincent threw his entire body weight sideways, chair and all, slamming into Marcus's legs. The gun went off. The bullet missed Elena's head by inches, punching through the chair back instead. Marcus stumbled, and Lucien was already moving, crossing the distance faster than should have been possible, tackling Marcus to the ground before he could recover his balance. They hit the concrete hard, both scrambling for the gun that had gone skittering across the floor. Lucien got there first, spun, fired. The bullet caught Marcus in the chest, dead center, dropping him like a puppet with cut strings. For a moment, the warehouse was absolutely silent except for ragged breathing and the sound of blood dripping onto concrete. Then Lucien was at Elena's side, producing a knife from somewhere, cutting through the zip ties with shaking hands. "Are you hurt?" His hands ran over her, checking for injuries, for blood, for any sign she'd been damaged. "Did he hurt you? The baby? Is the baby?" "We're fine." Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Vincent. Check Vincent." But they both knew from the amount of blood pooled beneath Vincent's chair that fine wasn't an option anymore. Lucien crossed to his head of security, kneeling beside him. Vincent's face had gone gray, his breathing shallow and irregular. "Boss," Vincent managed. "Sorry, should have stopped her. Should have—" "Don't." Lucien's voice cracked. "Don't apologize. You saved her life. You saved my life. You— Get her out!" Vincent's eyes were already glazing over. "Get her out of Chicago. Constantine's still out there, still dangerous. You can't trust anyone now. Just get her somewhere safe," and his breath caught, held, didn't start again. Lucien stayed kneeling beside Vincent's body for a long moment, one hand pressed against his friend's chest like he could somehow restart the heart that had stopped beating. Then he stood, turned to Elena, and she saw something in his eyes that terrified her more than anything else that had happened tonight. "We're leaving," he said. "Right now. No arguments." "Lucien?" Marcus was right about one thing. I've been weak, sentimental, too focused on protecting you to see the knives at my back. His voice went flat, empty. "That ends now." He crossed to where his guns had fallen, collecting them with mechanical efficiency. Then he grabbed Marcus's gun too, checking the magazine, adding it to his arsenal. "The council meeting," Elena said. "The vote. You have to—" "The vote doesn't matter anymore. Constantine wins by default if I'm not there. Which means Chicago isn't safe. This building isn't safe. The penthouse isn't safe. Nothing is safe until I eliminate every single person who betrayed me." "How many people is that?" Lucien looked at her, and the coldness in his expression made her blood freeze. "All of them." They left through the back exit, Lucien moving with the kind of hyper-focused awareness that came from knowing death was hunting them. Outside, the warehouse district was crawling with sirens. Police, ambulances, probably federal agents too, because 30 dead bodies tended to attract attention. Lucien led Elena to a car she didn't recognize, something black and expensive that had been waiting in a lot 3 blocks away. "Get in." Elena obeyed, too shocked to argue, too terrified to process what had just happened. Lucien drove in silence, taking turns seemingly at random, doubling back, checking mirrors with paranoid frequency. They'd been driving for 20 minutes before Elena found her voice. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere Constantine can't find us." Lucien's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "I have safe houses, places nobody knows about. We'll hole up, regroup, figure out our next move." "Our next move is running? Our next move is surviving." He shot her a look that could have cut glass. "You almost died tonight, Elena. You and our daughter, because you couldn't follow one simple instruction to stay in the goddamn penthouse." The words hit like a slap. "I thought I was helping," Elena said quietly. "I thought if there was a traitor, if someone was feeding information to Constantine, you needed to know before—" "You thought?" Lucien laughed, bitter and sharp. "You thought. And Vincent died because of it. 23 of my men died because of it. And I almost lost you, because you thought you could play detective in a world you don't understand." "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring them back. Sorry doesn't change the fact that I'm now at war with my own organization. Sorry doesn't—" He stopped, jaw clenching so hard she heard teeth grind. "Just don't. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't make excuses. Just sit there and think about the fact that your impulsive decision cost Vincent his life." The guilt hit like a physical weight. Vincent had saved her, had thrown himself at Marcus despite the bullet wound, despite knowing it would probably kill him, because that was who he was. loyal to the end. And now he was dead. Because Elena had been stupid enough to fall for an obvious trap. Because she'd broken her promise to Lucian. Because she'd thought she could help instead of realizing she was always going to be the liability, the weakness, the vulnerability that enemies would exploit. She pressed a hand to her stomach, feeling the baby move beneath her palm. This child was growing inside a mother who got people killed. This child would be born into a world at war. This child's father was currently driving them toward an uncertain future while his empire burned behind him. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered again, even though he'd told her not to. Lucien didn't respond. They drove through the night in suffocating silence, leaving Chicago behind as the city lights faded into darkness, carrying nothing but blood-stained clothes and the wreckage of everything they'd tried to build together. And somewhere behind them, Konstantin Fedorov smiled as he accepted the crown of an empire built on betrayal, not knowing that Lucien Moreau had already decided exactly how his uncle's story would end. Not with politics, not with votes, but with the kind of violence that would make the past 3 days look like a gentle warm-up for the war that was coming. The safe house was 2 hours outside Chicago, buried in the kind of rural nowhere that didn't have streetlights or neighbors, or anyone who'd ask questions about the blood-soaked man carrying a pregnant woman through the door at 3 in the morning. It wasn't much. Single-story ranch house, peeling paint, furniture that looked like it had been pulled from a Goodwill dumpster. But the windows were reinforced, the doors were steel beneath their wooden facades, and the basement had enough weapons and ammunition to fight off a small army. Lucien had bought it 6 years ago under a shell company that couldn't be traced back to him. One of a dozen properties scattered across 3 states, all maintained for exactly this kind of emergency. Elena stood in the living room while Lucien moved through the house with military precision, checking locks, testing alarm systems, closing curtains against windows that looked out onto empty fields and darkness. "Bathroom's down the hall," he said without looking at her. "There's clothes in the bedroom closet. Should fit well enough. Shower if you want. I need to make some calls." He disappeared into what looked like a home office before Elena could respond. She stood alone in the shabby living room, still wearing clothes spattered with Vincent's blood, still feeling the ghost impression of Marcus's gun pressed against her skull, still hearing the wet sound of Vincent's last breath. Her hands were shaking. Elena pressed them against her stomach, feeling the baby move beneath her palms. Still alive, still fighting, still growing despite everything trying to kill them both. The guilt was a living thing inside her chest, eating her from the inside out. Vincent was dead because of her. 23 men were dead because of her. Lucien's empire was burning because of her. She walked to the bathroom on legs that felt like they might give out any second. The shower was small, the water pressure weak, but it was hot, and it washed away the blood even if it couldn't wash away the memories. Elena stood under the spray until the water ran cold, until her skin was pink and raw, until she couldn't tell the difference between water and tears anymore. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that had seen better days, she could hear Lucian's voice from the office. Low, controlled, absolutely lethal. "Don't care what the council decided. Konstantin doesn't get to take what's mine just because I missed a vote. You tell him I'm coming. You tell him I'm bringing war, and you tell him that when I'm done there won't be enough left of him to bury." Silence. Then, "No. No deals, no negotiations. He tried to kill my family. That's not something you come back from. That's not something I forgive." More silence. "Then they die with him. Anyone still standing beside Konstantin when I come for him becomes a target. I don't care if they're scared. I don't care if he threatened them. They made their choice. Now they live with the consequences." The sound of something shattering, glass maybe, or ceramic. 3 days. That's how long you have to get out. After that, anyone still in Chicago is fair game. The call ended. Elena finished dressing in clothes she found in the bedroom, sweatpants and an oversized hoodie that probably belonged to whatever poor soul had used this safe house last. When she emerged, Lucien was in the kitchen, pouring whiskey with hands that shook almost imperceptibly. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 6 hours. "How bad is it?" Elena asked quietly. Lucien downed the whiskey in one swallow. Council voted 8-5 in Konstantin's favor. He's officially the new head of the organization. My assets are frozen. My properties are seized. There's a contract out on me worth $5 million. And on me? $3 million. He poured another drink. Constantine wants you dead before the baby's born. Doesn't want any heirs with a legitimate claim to the empire. Elena sank into one of the kitchen chairs, feeling the weight of it settle over her like a burial shroud. So we run. We take the money you stashed away, we leave the country, we start over somewhere Constantine can never find us. No. Lucien, no. He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was pure murder. I'm not running. I'm not letting Constantine win, and I'm sure as hell not letting him think he can threaten my child and get away with it. You can't fight an entire organization by yourself. Watch me. You'll die. Maybe. He set down the glass with controlled precision. But I'll take Constantine with me, and Marcus, and everyone else who thought they could take what's mine. Marcus is already dead. Marcus was just the beginning. Lucien's voice dropped to something barely human. You want to know what I've been doing for the past hour while you were in the shower? I've been calling in every favor I'm owed, every debt, every alliance I've built over 10 years of running this organization. And you know what I found? Elena waited. I've got 12 men willing to die for me. 12. Out of an organization of 200. That's how many people I can actually trust when the chips are down and the money's on the line. 12 men can't fight an army. 12 loyal men are worth more than 200 cowards. Lucien pulled out his phone, pulling up a map of Chicago covered in red pins. Constantine thinks he's won. Thinks he can sit in my office, sleep in my bed, run my empire. He's wrong. Because while he's celebrating, I'm going to dismantle everything he thinks he controls. Hit his supply lines, destroy his revenue streams, turn his allies against him by showing them exactly how weak he really is. That's not a plan. That's suicide. It's war. Lucien looked at her, really looked at her, and Elena saw something in his expression that terrified her. Not rage, not hate, just cold, absolute certainty. And war is what I'm good at. Elena pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to process. What about me? What am I supposed to do while you're out there getting yourself killed? You stay here. I've got 2 of my 12 men coming to guard this place. They'll keep you safe while I handle Constantine. So I just sit here, pregnant and helpless, while you throw yourself at an army? You stay alive. That's all I need from you. His voice softened slightly. Elena, I need to know you and the baby are safe. That's the only thing keeping me human right now. If I lose you, if something happens to our daughter, I'll burn the entire world down and won't stop until there's nothing left. So please, just stay here. Stay safe. Let me do what I do best. Killing people. Protecting what's mine. They stared at each other across the shabby kitchen, and Elena realized with terrible clarity that there was no argument she could make that would change his mind. Lucien had already decided, had already chosen violence over survival, revenge over escape. And part of her, the part that still felt Vincent's blood on her hands, that still heard Marcus's voice promising to kill her baby, that still remembered starving on Chicago's streets while Constantine's people stole everything she needed to survive, wanted him to burn them all. When do you leave? She asked quietly. Tomorrow night. I need daylight to set things up, and I need Constantine comfortable. Let him think I'm running scared, then I hit him where it hurts. And if you don't come back? Lucien crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair like he had that first night in the hospital. His hands framed her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. Then you take the account information in the office safe. Password is your birthday plus our wedding anniversary. There's enough money to disappear, to raise our daughter somewhere beautiful, to build the life you deserve. He pressed his forehead against hers. And you tell her I loved her, that I died trying to make the world safe enough for her to exist in it. Tears burned behind Elena's eyes. Don't talk like you're already dead. I'm being realistic. You're being fatalistic, again. She pulled back, forcing him to look at her. You want to go to war? Fine. You want to destroy Constantine? I understand, but you don't get to do it on a suicide mission. You don't get to throw your life away and leave me to raise our daughter alone. Then what do you want me to do? Win. The word came out fierce, desperate. Don't just hurt him. Don't just make him pay. Win completely, totally, so thoroughly that nobody ever questions your right to that empire again. Something shifted in Lucien's expression. That's not how you wanted me to be. You wanted normal. You wanted safe. I wanted naive things before I understood what your world actually costs. Elena's hands covered his. But I understand now. And I understand that the only way we survive is if you're strong enough, ruthless enough, terrifying enough that nobody ever tries this again. So don't go out there to die gloriously. Go out there to win. Lucian studied her face for a long moment. Then he kissed her, hard and desperate and tasting like whiskey and violence. I'll win, he promised against her lips. I'll burn them all and come back to you. I swear it. The next 36 hours passed in tense, suffocating silence. 2 men arrived at dawn, both in their 40s, both carrying enough weapons to fight off a small militia, both looking at Elena with the kind of careful respect usually reserved for religious artifacts or unexploded bombs. Ma'am, the older one, introduced as Thomas, nodded once. We've secured the perimeter. Nobody's getting close to this house without us knowing about it. The younger one, Jake, was already setting up additional security equipment, cameras, and motion sensors that would turn the shabby ranch house into a fortress. Lucien spent the day in the office, making calls, coordinating with his 12 loyal soldiers, planning an assault that would either reclaim his empire or get them all killed. Elena tried to eat, tried to rest, tried to do anything except imagine all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. At dinner, takeout Chinese that Jake picked up from a restaurant 20 miles away, paid for in cash, delivered in boxes that he checked for tracking devices before bringing inside. Lucien outlined his plan. Constantine's staying at the Drake Hotel, presidential suite. He's got security, but it's sloppy, too confident. He thinks I'm running. Lucien pushed rice around his plate without eating. I'm hitting him tomorrow night. Two-pronged attack. My team goes after his supply warehouse on the south side while I go after Constantine directly. Why split your forces? Elena asked. 12 men isn't enough to fight 2 battles. Because Constantine needs to think the warehouse is the real target. Needs to pull security from the hotel to protect his money. That's when I go in. Alone? With 2 men, small team, fast, in and out before anyone realizes what's happening. Elena set down her fork. That's insane. You're walking into a hotel full of people who want you dead. I'm walking into a hotel to kill the man who tried to murder my family. Lucian's voice went flat. Everything else is just obstacles. Obstacles with guns. I faced worse. When? He looked at her with eyes older than his years. Every day since I was 18 and inherited an empire built on my father's corpse. The words settled over the table like ash. Thomas cleared his throat. Boss, if I may, the plan is solid, risky, but solid. Constantine won't expect you to come at him directly. He thinks you're going to rebuild, regroup, come at him in 6 months with a proper army. Which is exactly why I'm hitting him now, Lucien said. While he's vulnerable. While he's celebrating. While he thinks he's won. Elena wanted to argue. Wanted to beg him to reconsider. To find another way. To choose survival over revenge. But she could see in his face that the decision was already made. This was happening. Tomorrow night, Lucien Moreau was going to war, and either Constantine would die or Lucien would. There was no third option. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in the safe house's cramped bedroom, listening to Lucien move through the house, checking locks and weapons, and making last-minute preparations for tomorrow's assault. Around 2 a.m., he finally came to bed. He didn't try to sleep, just lay beside her in the darkness, one hand resting on her stomach where their daughter was growing, and said nothing. I'm scared, Elena whispered finally. I know. What if you don't come back? Then Thomas and Jake get you out of the country. I've already given them instructions. Mexico first, then South America, then wherever you want to go that Constantine can't reach. I don't want to run without you. You won't have a choice. His hand pressed a little firmer against her stomach. Promise me, if I don't make it. You run. You protect our daughter. You don't try to be brave or get revenge or any of the stupid shit that'll get you killed. Lucien, promise me, Elena. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I promise. He pulled her closer, wrapping around her like he could shield her from the entire world through sheer force of will. They lay like that until dawn, not sleeping, just holding each other, memorizing the feel of skin against skin, trying to stretch a few hours into forever. When the sun finally rose, Lucien kissed her one last time, dressed in tactical black that made him look like death personified, and walked out the door without looking back. Elena stood at the window, watching his car disappear down the dirt road, one hand pressed to the glass like she could hold him there through sheer desperation. "He'll be fine," Thomas said from behind her. "Boss always comes through." Elena didn't respond, because they both knew that luck eventually ran out, and Lucien's had been running thin for a very long time. The day passed in agonizing slow motion. Elena tried to distract herself, read a book she couldn't focus on, watch television that might as well have been static, ate food that tasted like sawdust. Thomas and Jake maintained their watch, communicating in terse radio calls with Lucien's team, tracking the progress of the assault on Constantine's warehouse. At 6 p.m., the warehouse attack began. Elena listened to the radio chatter, trying to translate the military jargon and code words into something she could understand. Alpha team in position. Confirmed. Warehouse security is minimal. 6 guards visible. Proceed with infiltration. Gunfire crackled through the radio, shouting. The distinctive sound of explosions. Charges set. Building is compromised. Fall back! Fall back! Building's coming down. A massive explosion that Elena could hear even through the radio's tinny speakers. Then, cutting through the chaos, a voice she didn't recognize. Security's pulling out. Hotel's losing people. Boss was right. They're protecting the money. That was Lucien's cue. That was the moment he walked into the Drake Hotel to kill his uncle. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to breathe through the panic. Thomas was still monitoring the radio, face grim. Boss is going dark. Radio silence until the mission's complete. What does that mean? Means we won't hear from him until it's done. Can't risk communication when he's infiltrating hostile territory. So we just wait? We wait. The minutes crawled past like dying things. 7 p.m. became 8. 8 became 9. At 9:30, Jake's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then at Thomas, his expression going carefully neutral. "What?" Elena demanded. "What is it?" Jake hesitated. "There's police activity at the Drake. Lots of it. Ambulances, fire trucks. Something went down." Elena's heart stopped. "Is Lucien—" "We don't know. Radio's still silent." Call him. Call him right now." Thomas pulled out a secure phone, dialing a number Elena didn't recognize. It rang and rang and rang. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. "Maybe he's busy," Jake offered. "Maybe he's still—" Thomas's phone rang. He answered on the first ring. "Talk to me." His expression went very still, very careful. The kind of careful that preceded devastation. "Understood. Yes, we'll secure the package. Confirm when you can." He ended the call, looked at Elena, and she knew from his face that everything had just gone catastrophically wrong. "What happened?" Her voice came out steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Where's Lucien?" "That was Marco, the medic. He was with the backup team." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Boss made it to Constantine's suite. There was a fight. Constantine's dead, but what?" "But Constantine had more security than we thought. Boss took 3 bullets getting out. Marco's got him stabilized, but it's bad. They're bringing him here now." The world tilted sideways. Elena gripped the back of the couch, trying to stay upright. "How bad?" "One in the shoulder, one in the side, one in the leg." Thomas's voice was flat, clinical. "He's lost a lot of blood. Marco says the next few hours are critical. He needs a hospital." "Hospital means police. Police means arrest. He can't—" "I don't care." The words exploded out of her. "He's dying and you're worried about arrest records?" "I'm worried about keeping him alive long enough to recover," Thomas snapped back. "Hospital right now means cops crawling all over him, asking questions about the 23 bodies at that warehouse and the 6 dead guards at the Drake Hotel. He goes to a hospital, he ends up in prison, or dead from one of Constantine's remaining allies. Marco's good. Best combat medic in the business. If anyone can save him, it's Marco." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to scream that she didn't care about prison or allies or any of it. She just wanted Lucien alive. But she also knew Thomas was right. So she just stood there, numb and terrified, waiting for the man she loved to arrive bleeding and broken from a war he'd insisted on fighting. The car pulled up 40 minutes later. Marco came through the door first, already barking orders. Clear the kitchen table. I need light. I need towels. I need every piece of medical equipment in this house right goddamn now. Jake and Thomas moved immediately, transforming the shabby kitchen into something resembling an operating theater. Then two more men Elena didn't recognize carried Lucian through the door. He was unconscious, pale as death, soaked in so much blood that Elena couldn't tell where the wounds ended and his clothes began. "Oh God," she heard herself whisper. "Oh God, Lucien." They laid him on the table. Marco was already cutting away the blood-soaked tactical gear, exposing bullet wounds that looked like something from a nightmare. Shoulders through and through, clean, legs bad but manageable. The one in the side is the problem. Hit his liver. He's bleeding internally. Marco looked up at Thomas. "I need to operate, now. And I need everyone who's not helping to get out." "I'm staying," Elena said. "Ma'am, I'm staying." Her voice left no room for argument. "That's my family bleeding out on your table. I'm not leaving." Marco looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then make yourself useful. Stand there. Hold that IV bag. And if you're going to pass out or vomit, warn me first so I can work around you." Elena took the IV bag with shaking hands, watching Marco work with the kind of focused intensity that came from years of keeping people alive in situations where they should have died. He cut. He cauterized. He stitched. Lucian didn't move through any of it, too far gone into shock to register pain. An hour passed. Then two. At some point, Elena realized she was crying. Silent tears streaming down her face while she held the IV bag that was keeping Lucien's blood pressure high enough to survive. "Talk to him," Marco said without looking up from the delicate work of repairing Lucien's liver. "Studies show unconscious patients respond to familiar voices." Elena didn't know what to say, didn't know how to summarize everything she was feeling into words, so she just started talking. "You better not die," she whispered. "You better not leave me here alone with our daughter, because I don't know how to do this without you. I don't know how to raise a child in your world. I don't know how to be strong enough or ruthless enough or terrifying enough to protect her from all the people who'll want to hurt her just because she's yours." Lucian's hand twitched, just slightly, but enough that Elena saw it. "That's right," she continued, voice getting stronger. "You hear me. You're not allowed to die. You promised me you'd win. You promised me you'd come back. So you better keep that promise, Lucien Moreau. You better wake up and tell me Constantine's dead and we're safe and this nightmare is finally over." Marco pulled back, checking his work. "Got the bleeding stopped. Liver's patched. He's stable. For now." "For now?" Elena's voice cracked. "What does that mean?" "Means the next 12 hours will tell us if he survives or not. Infection's the biggest risk now. That and his body going into shock from the trauma." Marco started bandaging the wounds with practiced efficiency. "He needs rest, antibiotics, and a lot of luck." "He's out of luck. He's been out of luck since the moment he met me." "Then maybe you'll be lucky enough for both of you." Marco finished the last bandage, then looked at Elena with something that might have been sympathy. "He killed Constantine. Walked into that suite and put 2 bullets in his head before Constantine even knew he was there. The Empire's yours again. Or it will be if Lucien survives to claim it." The words should have felt like victory, should have felt like relief. Instead, they just felt hollow. Because what good was an empire if the man who'd bled for it didn't live to see it? They moved Lucien to the bedroom, settled him onto sheets that would definitely be ruined by morning, connected him to monitors that beeped with steady, stubborn insistence that his heart was still beating. Elena climbed into bed beside him, careful not to jostle the injuries, and pressed her hand over his heart. "Don't leave me," she whispered into the darkness. "Please, I can't do this without you." Lucien didn't answer, just kept breathing, shallow and labored, fighting for survival the same way he'd fought for everything else in his life. Brutal, relentless, refusing to surrender even when death reached for him with greedy hands. And Elena lay beside him through the longest night of her life, feeling their daughter move inside her, listening to the monitors confirm he was still alive, still fighting, still refusing to give up. Because if Lucien Moreau had taught her anything, it was this. Survival wasn't about being strong enough. It was about being stubborn enough to keep breathing when everything tried to stop you. And Lucien had always been the most stubborn bastard she'd ever met. So she held his hand, counted his heartbeats, and willed him to live through sheer force of desperate love. While outside the safe house, the city of Chicago woke to news that Konstantin Fedorov was dead, and the criminal empire he'd ruled for less than 48 hours was already tearing itself apart in the power vacuum left behind. Lucian opened his eyes on the third day. Not dramatically. Not with gasping or confusion or any of the theatrical bullshit movies made dying look like. He just blinked once, twice, his gaze finding the water-stained ceiling of the safe house bedroom, then sliding sideways to where Elena sat in a chair beside the bed, half asleep with her hand wrapped around his. "You look terrible," he said, his voice like gravel scraped across concrete. Elena's head snapped up. For a moment she just stared at him, like her brain couldn't process that he was actually awake, actually talking, actually alive. Then she was crying, messy and ugly and relieved, pressing her face against his chest while being careful not to jostle the bandages. "You bastard," she sobbed. "You absolute bastard. You were supposed to come back safe. You promised." "I came back." His hand moved to her hair, fingers threading through the tangles. "I won. Konstantin's dead. That's what matters." "You almost died." "But I didn't." He tried to sit up, grimaced, gave up. "How long was I out?" 72 hours. Marco said if you didn't wake up by tonight, we'd have to risk moving you to a hospital. Elena pulled back, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand. "The baby's fine. I'm fine, and you're an idiot." "Noted." Lucien's gaze swept the room, taking inventory. "Where's Thomas?" "Coordinating with your people. Apparently killing Konstantin created a power vacuum. Half the organization wants you back. The other half is fighting over the scraps." "Standard." He closed his eyes briefly, looking exhausted even from that short conversation. "Help me up." "Absolutely not. Marco said—" "I don't care what Marco said. If my organization is tearing itself apart, I need to be visible, need to show strength. Can't do that from a bed." "You can't even sit up without passing out." "Then I'll pass out standing." His jaw set with the kind of stubborn determination that had kept him alive through 3 bullet wounds. "Elena, please. I need to do this." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was being ridiculous, that his pride wasn't worth reopening his wounds, that the Empire could wait while he healed. But she also knew that look, knew that trying to stop him would just make him more determined. So she helped him sit up, moving slowly, letting him adjust to being vertical. His face went gray with pain, but he didn't complain, just gritted his teeth and pushed through it. By the time Thomas appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, Lucien was dressed in clean clothes, sitting in a chair like he wasn't currently held together by stitches and sheer willpower. "Boss?" Thomas's expression flickered between relief and concern. "You should be resting." "I'll rest when I'm dead." "What's the situation?" Thomas glanced at Elena, then back at Lucien. "You want the diplomatic version or the truth?" "Always the truth. It's a shit show. Konstantin's inner circle scattered the moment word got out he was dead. Some went to ground, some tried to flee the city. We picked up 3 trying to board a flight to Mexico City. They're in holding, waiting for your orders." "Kill them." The words came out flat, emotionless, like he was ordering coffee instead of executions. Thomas nodded. "Already done. But that's the easy part. The hard part is the council. They're demanding a meeting, want to confirm your leadership officially, want assurances that there won't be retaliation for voting against you. They want forgiveness." Lucien's laugh was bitter. "For choosing Konstantin, for stealing my empire, for putting a price on my family's heads. They want to know if they're going to live or die." Lucien was quiet for a long moment, staring at nothing. Elena could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, the cold math of power and survival. "Set up a meeting," he said finally. "Tomorrow night. Same location as last time. Tell them I'm willing to negotiate terms." "You're not actually going to negotiate. It wasn't a question. I'm going to remind them what happens when people forget who I am." Lucien's eyes went cold. "And then I'm going to rebuild this organization exactly how it should have been from the start, without traitors, without politicians, without anyone weak enough to be bought." Thomas left to make the arrangements. Elena waited until they were alone, then said quietly, "You're planning to kill them, the council members who voted against you. Not all of them, just the ones who knew about the coup beforehand, the ones who actively helped Konstantin." He looked at her, expression unreadable. Does that bother you? She thought about Vincent, dead because of their betrayal, about herself, starving on the streets while they stole her survival, about the baby growing inside her who almost never got the chance to exist. No, she said honestly. It doesn't. Something shifted in Lucien's expression, not quite approval, but close. You've changed. So have you. Have I? He studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time. Or did you just finally see who I really was? Both, maybe. Elena moved to sit beside him, taking his hand. I used to think there was a good man buried underneath the violence, someone I could save or change or fix. I don't think that anymore. Because there isn't one. Because you don't need saving. She squeezed his hand. You're exactly who you need to be to survive in this world. And our daughter needs a father who survives. Not a martyr, not a reformed saint, just someone strong enough to protect her from everything that'll try to hurt her. Lucien pulled her closer, careful of his injuries, pressing his forehead against hers. I'll build her something better. Not perfect, but better. An empire where loyalty means something, where family is protected, where nobody ever thinks they can take what's ours and live. That's all I want, Elena whispered. Her safe. Us together. Everything else is just details. They sat like that until the sun set, two broken people holding each other together, planning futures built on blood and love in equal measure. The council meeting happened in the same private club where Lucien had walked out 72 hours earlier. This time, he arrived with an army. 12 loyal soldiers had become 37 in the 3 days since Constantine's death. Word had spread that Lucien Moreau had walked into enemy territory, killed the usurper, and survived 3 bullets doing it. That kind of reputation drew people. The violent ones, the loyal ones, the ones who understood that power came from being more terrifying than everyone else. Elena insisted on attending despite Marco's protests about stress and pregnancy complications. She wore a dress that cost more than some cars, borrowed from resources Lucien had stashed for exactly these situations, and walked into that club like she owned it. Because in a way, she did. She was Lucien Moreau's woman, the mother of his child. And in the world they'd built together from violence and desperation, that made her untouchable. The council was already assembled when they arrived. 13 members, minus the 3 who'd fled and been executed, plus 1 empty seat where Marcus Delgado had sat before dying in that warehouse. They all stood when Lucien entered. Respect or fear, hard to tell the difference. Lucien took his place at the head of the table, Elena standing beside him, Thomas and Marco flanking them like guardian angels carved from steel and loyalty. Sit, Lucien said. They sat. He let the silence stretch, watching them squirm, watching fear work its way across faces that had voted to replace him less than a week ago. I'm going to make this simple, Lucien said finally. Constantine is dead. Marcus is dead. 3 others who tried to run are dead, which means I'm currently short 5 council members. That's 5 seats that need filling, 5 opportunities for advancement. The council members exchanged glances, confused, wary. But first, Lucien continued, we need to address the elephant in the room. 8 of you voted against me. 8 of you chose Constantine's leadership over mine. That's treason by any reasonable definition. So before we talk about rebuilding, before we talk about the future, we need to talk about consequences. Lucien, one of them started to speak. I'm not finished. His voice cut like a blade. I've spent the past 3 days investigating, pulling records, interviewing people, tracking money. And you know what I found? 5 of you knew about the coup beforehand, actively participated in planning it, helped Constantine orchestrate my wife's destruction, and then voted to legitimize his takeover. He pulled out a tablet showing financial records that painted a damning picture. Sebastian Klein, you helped funnel the money stolen from Elena's settlement into offshore accounts. $2 million gone, while she starved on the streets carrying my child. Sebastian went pale. Angela Morrison, you provided Constantine with security details, guard rotations, vulnerability assessments. You literally handed him the keys to attack me. Angela started to stand. 2 of Lucien's men appeared behind her chair, hands on her shoulders, pushing her back down. David Park, You recruited 7 people to Constantine's cause, promised them promotions, money, power. 3 of them participated in the warehouse ambush where Vincent Torres died. David's hands shook. Catherine Zhang, you laundered money for Constantine's war chest, cleaned $5 million through your real estate companies so he could buy loyalty. Catherine's face was stone. And Robert Castellano, you personally ordered the hit on Elena. $3 million contract, paid in advance. I found the wire transfer from your personal account. Robert stood, hands raised. Lucien, listen. It was nothing personal. It was just business. Constantine promised. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Robert collapsed, a neat hole in his forehead, dead before he hit the floor. Lucien lowered the gun, looking at the remaining 4 conspirators who'd just watched their colleague die. That, he said calmly, was personal. You tried to kill my family. You don't come back from that. You don't negotiate. You just die. He nodded to his men. What followed was brutal, efficient, and over in less than 30 seconds. 4 more gunshots. 4 more bodies. Blood spreading across expensive carpet. The remaining council members sat frozen, too terrified to move, watching Lucien calmly set his gun on the table. Now, he said, like he hadn't just executed 5 people. Let's talk about the future. Those of you who voted against me but weren't involved in the conspiracy, you get to keep your seats, your lives, your positions. Consider it mercy for being stupid instead of treasonous. Silence. But understand this, Lucien continued, his voice dropping to something barely human. This organization runs on loyalty now, not politics, not money. Loyalty. You betray me, you die. You threaten my family, you die. You even think about another coup. You die before the thought finishes forming. Is that clear? Nods all around, frantic, desperate. Good. Lucien stood, ignoring the way his injuries pulled. Meeting adjourned. We reconvene next week to discuss succession planning, revenue streams, and rebuilding what Constantine destroyed. Thomas will send details. He turned to leave, Elena following, but stopped at the door. One more thing, he said without turning around. Elena is no longer my ex-wife. We're getting remarried soon, and when our daughter is born, she becomes part of this organization's legacy. Anyone who has a problem with that can speak now or forever hold their peace. Nobody spoke. Excellent. Lucien finally looked back, and his smile was the kind that preceded nightmares. Welcome to the new regime. Don't make me regret letting you live. They left the club surrounded by loyal soldiers, leaving 8 terrified council members and 5 corpses behind. In the car, Elena took Lucien's hand, feeling it shake slightly from pain and adrenaline. You should have let Marco give you something for the pain, she said quietly. Couldn't. Needed to be sharp. Needed them to see strength, not weakness. They saw a man who executed 5 people without flinching. Good. That's what they needed to see. He leaned back against the seat, eyes closing. It's over. Finally over. Elena looked at him. This complicated, violent, broken man who'd just killed 5 people to protect her, and felt something settle inside her chest. Not peace, not quite, but acceptance. This was who he was. This was the world they'd chosen. And she could either reject it and spend the rest of her life fighting against reality, or she could accept it and build something beautiful inside the darkness. She chose acceptance. Take us home, she told Thomas. Not the penthouse, not the safe house. Home. Wherever that would be as long as they were together. Ken. 3 weeks later, they were married in a private ceremony that bore no resemblance to their first wedding. No cathedral, no guests beyond the handful of people Lucien trusted with his life, no extravagant celebration or press coverage or any of the performative bullshit that had made their first marriage feel like a business transaction. Just vows exchanged in the living room of a brownstone Lucien had purchased in one of Chicago's oldest neighborhoods, with Marco and Thomas as witnesses, and Sophia standing guard at the door. Elena wore a simple dress that accommodated her growing belly. Lucien wore a suit that hid the scars from 3 bullet wounds that were still healing. The vows were short, direct, stripped of all romantic pretense. I promise to protect you, Lucien said, his hands holding hers, to provide for you, to choose you over everything else, even when it costs me everything. I promise to be the father our daughter deserves, and the partner you need, even when I'm not the man you wanted. Elena's throat tightened. I promise to stand beside you, to accept who you are without trying to change you, to raise our daughter in this world you've built and teach her to be strong enough to survive it. I promise to love you even when it's hard, even when it's terrifying, even when everyone tells me I shouldn't. No officiant declared them husband and wife. No music played. No applause erupted. Lucian just pulled her close and kissed her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to humanity. And maybe she was. The brownstone became their home. 3 stories, hardwood floors, windows that let in actual sunlight. Still equipped with security systems that cost more than most houses, still staffed with guards who patrolled the perimeter, still very much part of Lucien's dark empire. But it felt different than the glass penthouse. Felt like a place where a family could exist, where their daughter could grow up surrounded by books and toys and the sound of laughter instead of just clinical luxury and silent guards. Lucien began the slow process of dismantling the worst parts of his criminal empire. Not because he'd suddenly developed a conscience, but because he'd realized something crucial in that warehouse where Vincent died. Power built on fear alone was unstable. People needed something to believe in beyond violence. So he shifted operations, moved away from the drug trade that had built his fortune, focused instead on gambling, real estate, legitimate businesses with questionable ethics but fewer bodies. It wasn't clean, would never be clean, but it was better, less blood, more sustainability, a model that could theoretically exist without getting everyone killed. Elena, meanwhile, took the money that had almost been stolen from her and did exactly what she'd told Lucian she wanted to do back when this nightmare started. She built a foundation for pregnant women escaping poverty, abuse, violence, women just like she'd been, alone and terrified and one bad decision away from dying on the streets. The foundation operated through a network of safe houses, medical care, legal support, job training. Everything Elena hadn't had when she needed it most. Everything she could provide now that Lucian's empire gave her the resources to do so. It was funded through laundered money, staffed partially by people on Lucian's payroll, and definitely operated in moral gray areas that would make legitimate charities uncomfortable. But it saved lives. Real lives. Women who would have died otherwise, who got second chances, who rebuilt themselves from nothing into something stronger. And if that required blood money and criminal connections, Elena didn't care anymore. She'd learned the hard way that purity was a luxury poor people couldn't afford. Survival required compromise, and she'd chosen to survive. Dunk. At 37 weeks pregnant, Elena stood in the nursery Lucien had built on the brownstone's second floor, assembling a crib while he watched from the doorway. "You're not supposed to be doing that," he said. "Dr. Chen specifically said no heavy lifting." "It's a crib, not a piano." Elena tightened another screw, refusing to admit her back was killing her. "And I'm not helpless just because I'm pregnant." "I know, but humor me. I've already lost enough people I love. I'd prefer not to add you and our daughter to that list because you were too stubborn to ask for help." Elena set down the screwdriver, turning to face him. "How are you doing? Really?" Lucien's hand went unconsciously to his side, where the worst of the bullet wounds had been. The physical damage was mostly healed now, but she knew the other scars, the ones that didn't show, were still raw. "I dream about Vincent sometimes," he said quietly, "about that warehouse. About finding him bleeding out because I was too stupid to see Marcus's betrayal coming. It wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I'm the one who built an organization where people felt comfortable committing treason. I'm the one who trusted Marcus. I'm the one who... You're the one who survived." Elena crossed to him, taking his face in her hands. "You're the one who won, who rebuilt, who's standing here about to become a father instead of dying in some pointless gang war. Vincent made his choice. He saved my life knowing what it would cost. Don't dishonor that by drowning in guilt." Lucian pulled her close as her pregnant belly would allow, burying his face in her hair. "I don't know how to be a father," he whispered. "My dad died when I was 18, and everything I learned from him was about violence, control, dominance. I don't want to teach our daughter that. Don't want her growing up thinking love comes with conditions and survival requires cruelty. Then we teach her something different." Elena's hands moved to his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "We teach her that love is complicated, that survival sometimes requires hard choices, that people can be both violent and tender, both dangerous and protective. We don't lie to her about what you are. We just make sure she knows you're also capable of being more. What if I'm not? You are. You already are. She guided his hand to her stomach, where their daughter was currently doing what felt like gymnastics. You built me a home. You rebuilt your empire into something less destructive. You execute traitors, but you also sit with me at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep because the baby's kicking. You're already more than just the monster people think you are. Lucian's hand pressed gently against her stomach, feeling the baby move beneath his palm. Something in his expression softened. What should we name her? He asked. They'd been avoiding this conversation for weeks. Dancing around it like naming the baby would make her too real, too vulnerable, too easy for the universe to take away. But she was coming. In a matter of weeks, maybe days, their daughter would exist outside Elena's body, would become a person instead of just a possibility. She deserved a name. I was thinking Isadora, Elena said quietly. It means gift in Greek. And she is, despite everything. Despite the violence and the fear and the absolute insanity of this whole situation, she's a gift. Isadora. Lucian tested the name, rolling it around like he was tasting something precious. Isadora Moreau. Isadora Vale Moreau, Elena corrected. She gets both our names, both our legacies, the good and the bad. There's no good in my legacy. There's you. That's good enough. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she might break. And for the first time since this nightmare started, Elena felt something that might have been hope. Bag. Isadora Moreau was born on a Tuesday at 6:30 a.m., during a snowstorm that shut down half of Chicago. Dr. Chen arrived at the brownstone 90 minutes before Elena's water broke, having been on standby for the past week. Marco set up the medical equipment in the master bedroom, transforming it into a delivery room that rivaled most hospitals. The labor was 12 hours of hell. Lucien stayed beside Elena the entire time, holding her hand while she screamed curses that would make sailors blush, letting her squeeze hard enough to bruise, whispering encouragement that probably didn't help, but at least gave her something to focus on besides the pain. When Isadora finally emerged, small and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, crying with the kind of outrage that suggested she hadn't asked to be born into this insane world, something fundamental shifted in the brownstone. Dr. Chen placed the baby on Elena's chest while Marco handled the medical aftermath, and Elena looked down at this tiny person they'd created and felt her heart crack open in ways she didn't know were possible. She's so small, Elena whispered, touching Isadora's impossibly tiny fingers. She's strong. Lucian's voice was rough with emotions he didn't bother hiding. Look at her grip. Isadora's hand had closed around his finger, holding on with surprising strength for someone less than 5 minutes old. She's a fighter, Dr. Chen confirmed, checking vitals. Good lungs, strong heartbeat. Everything looks perfect. Perfect. That word again. Elena had stopped believing in perfect months ago, had learned that life was messy and complicated and nothing ever worked out the way you planned. But looking at her daughter, at this tiny person who'd survived starvation, exposure, assassination attempts, and being born into a family built on blood and violence, Elena thought maybe perfect wasn't about having no flaws. Maybe perfect was about surviving despite them. Lucien sat on the edge of the bed, still holding Isadora's tiny hand, staring at his daughter like he'd never seen anything so miraculous. Hello, princess, he whispered. I'm your father, and I'm going to make you a promise right now. Nobody hurts you, ever. I don't care if I have to burn down the entire world to keep you safe. I don't care what it costs. You are protected, you are loved, and you are mine. Tears streamed down his face. The feared crime lord, the man who'd executed 5 people without flinching, the monster who'd built an empire on violence, openly crying because his daughter existed. Our daughter, Elena corrected softly. Ours, Lucien agreed. Always ours. They sat like that for a long time, the 3 of them together in the quiet aftermath of birth, while snow fell outside the windows and the city went about its business, unaware that something important had just happened in this brownstone. A family had been born, not a perfect one, not even close, but a family nonetheless, built on blood and love in equal measure, and that would have to be enough. Tifint, 6 months passed. The brownstone filled with the sounds of Isadora growing, crying, laughing, the chaos of early parenthood that left both Elena and Lucien exhausted, but somehow more complete than they'd been before. Lucien reduced his direct involvement in the organization's operations, delegating more to Thomas and the reconstructed council. He still made the important decisions, still held ultimate authority, still occasionally had to remind people why crossing him was fatal. But he also spent afternoons on the nursery floor, playing with Isadora, while Elena worked on expanding her foundation, spent evenings cooking dinner instead of attending meetings, spent nights walking the floors with a crying baby instead of walking the streets with a gun. He was still dangerous, still ruthless when circumstances required, still absolutely capable of violence. But he was also present, available, human in ways he'd never allowed himself to be before. Elena watched him change day by day, saw the hardness in his eyes soften slightly when he looked at their daughter, saw the way he prioritized being home for bedtime over dealing with whatever crisis the organization was facing. "You're different," she told him one night after they'd finally gotten Isadora to sleep. "Am I?" Lucien poured wine for both of them, settling onto the couch beside her. "You smile more. You're less—" She searched for the right word. Less cold. Less distant. Like becoming a father thawed something frozen inside you. "Fatherhood is terrifying," he said honestly. "Every day I wake up and realize I'm responsible for keeping another person alive. Not just physically safe, but emotionally healthy, psychologically stable. And I have no idea if I'm doing it right. If she'll grow up traumatized by having me as a father. If she'll hate me for the things I've done. She won't hate you." "How do you know?" "Because you're trying." Elena took his hand. "You could have stayed the cold, distant crime lord and delegated parenting to nannies and guards. But you didn't. You show up. You're present. You love her fiercely and protect her absolutely. That's all any child really needs." Lucien was quiet, staring at their joined hands. "Vincent would have loved her," he said suddenly. "Would have been the world's most overprotective uncle. Would have spoiled her rotten." "He would have." Elena's throat tightened. "I think about him sometimes, about what he sacrificed, about how different things would be if he'd survived. He saved you, both of you. That's what matters." Lucien's grip tightened, "And I made sure his family was taken care of. His sister's kids, his mother. They'll never want for anything. It's not enough. Can never be enough. But it's something." "You're a good man, Lucien Moreau." He laughed bitterly. "I'm a lot of things. Good isn't one of them. You're good to us. That's enough." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking wine, listening to the sounds of their daughter sleeping upstairs and the city existing beyond their walls. And Elena realized something profound. She was happy. Not in the naive, uncomplicated way she'd been happy before she understood what Lucien's world actually cost, but in a deeper, more resilient way. The kind of happiness that came from surviving hell together and building something beautiful from the ashes. Their life wasn't perfect, would never be perfect. There would always be threats, always be enemies, always be the shadow of violence lurking at the edges of their carefully constructed peace. But they'd survived, they'd won, and they'd created a family strong enough to weather whatever came next. That was enough. That would always be enough. Admit. 1 year after Isadora was born, Elena stood in the brownstone's kitchen making breakfast while Lucien sat on the floor with their daughter, helping her stack blocks that she immediately knocked down with delighted laughter. Sunlight streamed through the windows, painting everything gold. The coffee maker burbled. Toast popped. The radio played something soft and instrumental. It was so breathtakingly normal that Elena had to stop and marvel at it. This was the life she dreamed of back when she was starving on Chicago's streets, pregnant and alone, and certain she'd die before ever experiencing simple domestic moments like this. Back then, it had seemed impossible, a fantasy too distant to believe in. But she'd survived. They'd both survived. And somehow, impossibly, they'd built this. "Mama!" Isadora called, holding up a block triumphantly. "I see it, baby. That's amazing." Elena crossed to them, settling onto the floor beside Lucien. "You're such a good builder." Isadora promptly knocked the entire tower down again, laughing like destruction was the funniest thing in the world. Lucien caught Elena's eye, and they both smiled. because their daughter had learned an important lesson without realizing it. Sometimes you had to knock everything down before you could build something better. Sometimes destruction was just the first step toward creation. And sometimes the most beautiful things grew in the spaces where violence used to be. "I love you," Lucian said quietly, while Isadora rebuilt her block tower. "I know. I'm serious. I need you to know, before I got too comfortable with saying it, before it became routine. I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anything. You and Isadora. You're everything that matters. The empire, the money, the power. It's all just background noise. This is what's real." Elena leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "I love you too," she said. "Even though you're complicated and violent and occasionally terrifying, even though loving you meant accepting a world I never wanted to be part of, even though there were 1,000 moments where I should have walked away but didn't, I love you, and I'd choose you again, every time." Lucienne kissed the top of her head. Isadora knocked down her blocks. The coffee maker finished brewing, and somewhere in the distance, Chicago went about its business. Millions of people living their lives, having their dramas, fighting their battles, completely unaware that in this brownstone, on this quiet street, two people who'd survived hell together were building heaven one ordinary moment at a time. Because that was the truth nobody talked about when they told stories about crime lords and empires and violent men who ruled through fear. The truth was that monsters could love, that people built from darkness could still create light, that survival sometimes meant accepting the complicated, messy reality that humans were never just one thing. Lucien Moreau was a killer, a crime lord, a man with blood on his hands that would never wash clean. But he was also a father who played blocks with his daughter, a husband who made coffee for his wife, a man who'd learned that protecting his family meant more than just destroying their enemies. It meant being present, being available, being human enough to appreciate the small moments that made survival worthwhile. And Elena Vale, who'd once been a naive girl dreaming of simple happiness, had learned that love wasn't about finding someone without darkness. It was about finding someone whose darkness didn't consume everything around it. Someone who could hold violence in one hand and tenderness in the other without letting either destroy them. Someone who proved every single day that being a monster and being a good father weren't mutually exclusive. That was the lesson this nightmare had taught her. That was the truth she'd carry forward. And as she sat on the kitchen floor of their brownstone, watching Lucien help Isadora build towers that would inevitably fall, Elena finally understood what it meant to be at peace with the choices she'd made. Not because those choices were easy, not because the consequences weren't real, but because she'd survived them. They'd both survived. And survival, she'd learned, was its own kind of victory. The rest was just details. Get. The end. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messier than that, more complicated, built on compromises and blood and the kind of desperate love that only made sense to the people living it. But it was theirs, and in a world that had tried everything to tear them apart, that was the most important victory of all. They'd built a home inside the darkness, raised a daughter who would grow up understanding that life was complicated, that people contained multitudes, that love sometimes wore the face of violence when protection required it. And maybe that wasn't the ending Elena had dreamed of back when this nightmare started. Maybe it wasn't clean or perfect or morally uncomplicated. But it was real. It was survival. It was family. And for two people who'd fought their way back from the edge of destruction, that was everything.